Hey guys, tonight we step into the shadowy world of Viking survival. Deep in the ancient forests where wolves roam, trees whisper, and even moss can be a matter of life or death. Picture this, a thick, damp silence pressing in on you from every angle, broken only by the crunch of frost underfoot or the sudden hoot of an owl that's far too close for comfort. You're wrapped in fur, but the cold still seeps in like a ghost through the seams. And let's be honest, if someone dropped you here with nothing but an axe and a bad attitude, you probably wouldn't make it through the first night. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is there, so drop that in the comments. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake in a dim green haze. The canopy above is so thick it's swallowed the sky, and even though it's mid-morning, the light is already dozing off. Your bed is a patchwork of moss and pine needles that's clung to you like a needy toddler. Everything is damp, your tunic, your boots, your thoughts. There's a scent in the air, sharp and sour, wet bark, deer sweat, something fungal you'd rather not meet face to spore. You sit up, brush a beetle off your sleeve, and realize you've slept under a leaning spruce whose branches form a kind of natural tent. The Vikings had a word for this sort of impromptu shelter, lie. It didn't mean home, but it did mean this will do if you don't want to die tonight. Your fingers sting with the chill, so you reach into the leather pouch hanging from your belt. Inside, a scrap of beeswax stiffened wool, a flint, a few blackened curls of birch bark. If you were born 1,200 years too late for this, you'd already be toast. Literally. But you strike the flint anyway, half hopeful. The ember finally takes. Smoke spirals. You coax it with your breath and cup your hands like a cradle around the flickering life. Congratulations, you've made fire, and for now, that means you're winning. But it's not just about warmth. In Viking times, fire was insurance against more than cold. Wolves, trolls, even fellow men kept their distance from a smoking camp. Fire made you visible, but also dangerous. The forest was both a threat and a mirror. Show fear, and it reflected tenfold. You stoke the flame with a pine cone, listening to it crackle. That sound is more reassuring than any battle cry. It's primal, ancient. The kind of sound that once told your ancestors, "You'll live another day, maybe." Your breath puffs out in slow clouds. The air tastes metallic, like snow's on the way, even though the sky is nowhere to be seen. You pull your fur cloak tighter and scan the underbrush. In the Viking sagas, forests were often described as murk, not just dark, but sinister. These weren't Disney woods. People went in and didn't always come out the same, or at all. You stand, stretch, and feel your joints complain like old dogs. The forest floor dips and rises with hidden roots and sinkholes. You take careful steps, remembering one of the earliest lessons from the sagas. Never trust flat ground. It's probably lying. Ahead, the path splits. One trail leads toward a gurgling stream you can just barely hear. The other disappears into thick bramble, promising either a shortcut or a slow, thorny death. You flip a coin. Not a literal one, of course. You tug the cord around your neck and rub the tiny Thor's hammer charm between your fingers. Vikings didn't flip coins. They asked gods. Your stomach rumbles, loudly. You haven't eaten since yesterday's squirrel, and let's just say he didn't volunteer. You need food, but you also need to move. A still body is a cold one, and cold means mistakes, and mistakes mean, well, that ravine back there wasn't always empty. You head toward the stream. The moss underfoot squishes unpleasantly, and every so often a branch slaps you like you said something rude about its mother. But you keep going, marking trees with tiny cuts from your belt knife. Not because you're lost, of course, just directionally disoriented. There's a difference. As you walk, you hum. It's a tuneless Viking lullaby passed down through families, often used when calming children or scaring off ghosts. The forest listens, you can feel it. Historians still argue whether Viking survival in the woods relied more on practical knowledge or spiritual conviction. The truth is probably both. After all, it's hard to gather mushrooms confidently when you also believe some of them belong to forest spirits who don't like being disturbed. You reach the stream. It's narrow, but the current's fast, frothy around jagged rocks. You crouch, fill a horn cup with water, and let it settle. You whisper a thanks to Ran, the sea goddess, just in case she's got cousins here. Vikings believed spirits lived in all natural places. Landvatir, they called them. To spit in a stream or relieve yourself near a sacred tree wasn't just gross. It was offensive to the beings who might decide whether you froze or found a deer later. The water is icy, but clean. Probably. You sip, swish, swallow. Movement to your left. You freeze. Not like freeze, just Viking freeze. Which means crouching behind a log and clutching your axe like it's a security blanket. A deer steps into view. It drinks too, unaware of your existential dilemma. You almost sigh with relief, then realize, where there's prey, there's usually a predator. And sometimes that predator is also human. You tighten your grip on the axe's handle, not from fear exactly, but because that's what you do when your instincts whisper something's off. The deer's ears flick back, not toward you, something else, behind it. You stay still. Every Viking knew the trick to surviving in a forest wasn't strength, it was silence. The kind of silence that makes your own heartbeat feel rude. The underbrush behind the deer parts slowly, not with a crash, with intent. A second later, the head of a lynx appears. Mottled fur, gold eyes, the kind of feline grace that doesn't rush because it doesn't have to. It doesn't see you. Yet. You stay crouched. The deer bolts, the lynx lopes after it, and the woods return to stillness. That was close. Too close. You exhale, and your knees remind you that crouching behind a mossy log in damp trousers is not a long-term solution. As you rise and brush yourself off, your mind drifts to something seemingly mundane, but absolutely vital. Your boots. You glance down at the scuffed leather wrapped around your feet. They've saved your life more times than your axe ever has. See, Viking footwear wasn't just slapped together from cowhide and hope. They were carefully constructed, often with a turnshoe technique, sewn inside out and then flipped to hide the seams, keeping water out and warmth in. Your pair is stuffed with dried grass, not for comfort, for insulation. Mainstream history tends to skip over Viking fashion unless it's helmets or fur cloaks. But those boots? They were the real MVPs. A soggy foot in the forest meant trench foot, blisters, frostbite, or just walking slower, which in the Viking wilderness could mean becoming dinner. The Vikings didn't use rubber. They didn't need Gore-Tex. But they did rub their boots with animal fat, sometimes even pine tar, to create a semi-waterproof barrier. Your pair smells faintly of old goat and ash. It's not pleasant, but it's survival. Now imagine it's winter, snow creeping in from every side, and the firewood's wet again. Without the right footwear, even a short trek to check a snare can turn into a toe-numbing disaster. And it's not like you can stop and air-dry your socks in the middle of a snowstorm. Fringe Viking tales describe reindeer skin being used for soles in especially cold climates. The fur turned inward to trap heat. Some archaeologists argue whether this was common or reserved for wealthier travelers. Either way, it's warm, and right now, that's all that matters. You step over a fallen branch and feel the ground squish beneath you. Peat. This part of the forest is wetter, softer, and about 20% more likely to suck a boot right off your foot. Which is why you also remember to tie those hide thongs tight, wrapped around the ankles, crisscrossed over the top, tucked into the binding rings. One step too fast, and a splash of cold water makes it into your boot. You grimace. Yep, still works as a motivational tool. To dry them later, you'll have to set them upside down near the fire on forked sticks, just like Vikings did. But not too close. Burned leather is worse than wet leather. That's an old proverb you just made up, but the Vikings would have agreed. You pause to check your foot for blisters, ones forming near the arch, and you dig into your pouch for a strip of soft linen. Vikings weren't strangers to preventative care. A piece of cloth, some pitch sap, even mashed up yarrow could stop a small sore from becoming an infection. They didn't have antibiotics, but they had a decent working relationship with not dying, most of the time. Some fringe scholars even believe certain Vikings chewed willow bark while traveling through forests to dull pain in their legs and feet. That's basically prehistoric aspirin. Is it proven? Number. But your knees would appreciate the gesture. You keep moving. The forest path has started to rise, and your calves protest with every step. The boots, though, holding strong. No squish, no slop. Just firm leather flexing around your foot like it was made for you. Which, technically, it was. Viking shoes were custom fit, stitched by hand. Historians still argue whether Viking women traveled as frequently through the woods as men did. Some point to grave goods, knives, fire steels, even boots, as evidence they weren't just tending house. And based on the current state of your blister, you'd believe any woman tough enough to cross this terrain in hand-stitched shoes deserves a saga of her own. Suddenly, you hear voices. Muffled. 2, maybe 3. You drop into the ferns again. Just a reflex. The voices are speaking Old Norse. Fast, low, laughing. Could be hunters. Could be bandits. Could be people who won't care how nice your boots are if they want them. You wait until the voices fade. One of them spits. Close. Too close. Your heartbeat tries to punch through your ribs, then nothing, just wind. You emerge slowly, like a cautious mushroom. That was a near miss. You move off the path and follow a line of birch trees, each trunk white as bone. The bark peels like paper, and you pocket a strip. Later you'll dry it for kindling, or write a charm on it, or both. As you walk, you spot a footprint, deep, fresh, human. But the tread is uneven. Maybe they lost a soul. You smile, barely. Somewhere out there, someone's regretting their boot choices. And yours? Still dry, still whole. You pat them in thanks. Not sarcastically, genuinely. These boots have carried you through bog, brush, frost, and fear. And tomorrow, they'll carry you again. The cold is no longer just a backdrop. It's a personality. It clings to you like an ex who won't stop texting. Your breath fogs the air with every exhale, and your fingers, despite being stuffed into fur-lined gloves, are starting to lose the plot. The forest doesn't offer central heating. It offers something better, the chance to freeze in historically accurate discomfort. So you stop, stomp your feet, and remember a Viking trick you once heard, one that sounds ridiculous until you realize you're 5 minutes from frostbite. You pull off a glove, dig into your boot, and press your fingers into the clump of moss packed near your toes. Yes, moss. Not the kind you Instagram next to mushroom fairy rings, but the kind used to wick moisture and insulate like primitive Gore-Tex. Vikings often stuff their boots with dried reindeer moss or sphagnum, light, absorbent, and a little springy. It's not exactly luxurious, but it soaks up sweat before it turns into an icy foot slushy. You pack some fresh moss into your heel and wiggle your toes like a toddler refusing to nap. Slightly better, but moss alone doesn't save you from frostbite. So you take stock of the layers you're wearing. Wool, layers of it. Coarse but magical. Vikings swore by wool for a reason. It insulates even when wet. That's not marketing. It's physics. You're wearing a wool tunic, with another lighter one beneath. Over that, a linen shirt, long enough to tuck deep into your breeches, which are also wool. Over everything, your fur cloak, likely sheep or goat if you're low status, wolf or bear if you've either killed something impressive or inherited your uncle's sketchy trophies. Mainstream sources often reduce Viking cold weather gear to fur everything. That's flattering to fur, but insulting to ingenuity. Wool was the true MVP, often lanolin-rich and oil-coated to help shed moisture. To stay warm, Vikings also used fat. You reach into your pouch again and find a little leather flask of goose fat. It's smelly, it's greasy, and it's going straight on your cheeks and ears. Rubbing animal fat on exposed skin forms a protective layer. Not pleasant, but effective. You smear it across your face like the world's worst spa treatment. Historians still debate whether the use of fat was strictly practical or carried some ritualistic meaning. After all, some sagas describe warriors smearing themselves before battle with strange salves, not unlike this. Maybe it's for heat, maybe it's for luck, maybe it's both. You'll take it. Fringe Viking remedies even mention rubbing frostbitten skin with snow to wake it up, though modern science might call that a bold flirtation with necrosis. Still, the idea was to stimulate circulation. So, after applying your goose fat, you slap your hands together and stamp your boots. Hard. Keep the blood moving or the forest will take a little more of you every hour. Shelter's the next priority. That spruce you slept under? Not enough. You need something more substantial if the temperature drops again. And it will. You scan the horizon, looking for a fallen tree or thick underbrush you could lean into. Aha. There. Between two boulders, a cluster of branches has formed a natural windbreak. You crawl in, and immediately the temperature inside feels 5 degrees warmer. Still cold, just not insultingly cold. You reinforce the opening with some extra pine boughs. They're prickly. Your arms itch. Welcome to survival. The Vikings had a trick for that too, layering dried grass between clothes to add warmth and ventilation. It also helped prevent lice from making your tunic a permanent residence. Not perfectly, mind you. Lice were practically part of the culture, but every bit helped. Speaking of lice, you scratch your shoulder and wonder if something's crawling. Probably nothing. Probably. Your shelter's almost ready. But you remember something you learned from watching an elder set up camp years ago. Always insulate the ground. Cold seeps upward like guilt. So you gather pine needles, moss, and bark to form a barrier between you and the forest floor. By now, the wind's picking up. Not a gale, but a steady whistle that finds the holes in your defenses. You hunker down and light another small fire, low flames, just enough to warm your fingers. You keep your back to a stone wall to reflect the heat. Vikings knew these tricks. They didn't always build big fires. Small, efficient ones were safer, less smoky, and easier to hide. You stretch your legs and look up at the canopy. Through a gap, you see stars. Cold stars. Stars that watched your ancestors do this same ridiculous routine 1,000 years ago, likely muttering the Norse equivalent of, "Are you kidding me?" Fringe accounts suggest Vikings used body heat in creative ways. Curling together wasn't just for warmth, it was for survival. Solo travel was rare, and winter travel rarer. But if you had to go alone, you learned to trick your body into thinking it wasn't dying. You hum again, same tune as yesterday. Maybe louder. It helps. Then a weird thought. How did Vikings keep their beards from freezing? The answer? They didn't. Ice beards were common. The real trick was not to touch it. Break the ice and you'd break hair with it, so you leave your chin alone, even though it's starting to feel like you dunked it in a freezer full of porcupines. You eat a chunk of dried meat. Elk, probably. Smoked beyond recognition. It's hard as iron, but you chew it until it gives up. The salt is life. Your body perks up. A little. And then you pull out the final piece of warmth, a small carved bone, painted with red ochre. It's not warm in the literal sense, but it reminds you of home. Vikings carried charms like this, runes, figures, talismans, sometimes for gods, sometimes for mothers, always for courage. You tuck it under your tunic, close to your heart. The wind howls outside. You smile. You'll survive tonight. Probably. The fire is low, little more than a flickering orange heartbeat nestled in a cradle of stones. You watch it dance, hypnotized. But there's still one more task before sleep can be anything but dangerous: making sure you can make fire again. Because fire isn't just heat, it's power, protection, a Viking's insurance policy in a very flammable world. And as the embers crackle down into glowing memory, you decide to restock your kit. Not just because you're responsible, but because nothing screams rookie mistake, like waking up frostbitten and trying to light wet bark with sheer optimism. You pull out your pouch. Flint? Check. Steel striker? Check. Tinder? You wince, almost out. Time to go hunting for fire, Viking style. You grab a small knife and make your way back into the forest, keeping to the tree line. The moonlight is silver through the canopy, and your breath puffs in quiet clouds. The shadows here are long and full of suggestions, but you know what you're looking for. Fungus. Specifically, amadou, that weird velvety stuff that grows on dead birch trees and, miraculously, catches fire when treated right. Vikings called it tinder fungus, and it's about to become your new best friend. You spot some after only 10 minutes. Thank the gods, because you really didn't want to play fungal roulette with mystery mushrooms tonight. It's a bracket of foams fomentarius, clinging to a dead birch like a brown half-smile. You slice it off carefully, mindful not to damage the bark. It might not matter, but the forest remembers rude hands. You pocket the dry piece. It's hard now, but with a little boiling, beating, and ash treatment, it'll fluff up like cotton and catch a spark like magic. Vikings carried this everywhere. Fire on your belt, basically. Still, fungus isn't enough. You crouch and peel strips of birch bark from a fallen log. It peels easily, like soft paper full of oils. This is your kindling, and it smells oddly sweet, like winter tea and trouble. You stuff it all into your pouch, then start hunting dry grass. Even in the snow-slick forest, there are tufts beneath evergreens protected from dew. You pluck a handful, twist it, test the crispness. Satisfactory. And finally, a little secret weapon: resin. You scrape a glob of amber-colored sap from a pine. It smells like campfire dreams and old Christmases. When dry, it crumbles into powder. One spark, and it flares like fury. Back at your camp, you sit cross-legged and lay out your bounty like a squirrel arranging apocalypse snacks. Flint in one hand, steel in the other. You strike, sparks bloom. The birch curls catch, then the grass. You breathe slowly. And just like that, fire. Historians still argue over whether Vikings had matches. Spoiler, they didn't. But the fire steel kits found in graves suggest that even back then, lighting a flame was part ritual, part skill, and part sheer bloody-mindedness. The funny thing is, modern folks always assume fire was easy. Just rub two sticks together, right? But anyone who's ever tried it knows it's 80% technique, 20% swearing, and 100% humility. You warm your hands and feel a flicker of pride. This wasn't luck. This was earned. You take a moment to admire the tools that made it possible. The striker is a curved piece of iron, forged long ago, its edges darkened by use. You wonder who made it, what village, what forge, what story. The flint? Dug from riverbeds, chipped with care. Vikings used to shape them with bone hammers, shaving sharp edges until they spat fire like angry stars. Fringe theories even suggest some fire kits were buried ceremonially, like swords. Fire wasn't just survival, it was sacred. You toss another stick on the flame and stretch. Your shoulder cracks like dry wood. But you're not done yet. It's time for fire's twin obsession: smoke. Vikings used smoke for preservation, signaling, and, when things got desperate, bug control. You lean a branch into the fire at an angle, letting it smolder rather than burn. The smoke rises slowly, curling around the shelter. Your cloak picks it up, and soon you smell like a walking chimney. Perfect. Predators don't love smoke. And humans? Humans find it comforting, strangely. Smoke says warmth, food, people, even if it's just you and a fungus-covered knife. You glance upward, watching the stars through your half-shelter, and suddenly you remember there's more than one way to start a fire. Some Vikings used a bow drill, a contraption involving a stick, a socket, and a whole lot of patience. You've tried it once, burned your thumb, nearly set your pants on fire, and swore never again. Respect to those who made it work. Others used slow-burning cords made from treated moss and bark, coiled like snails and tucked in a pouch. Traveling embers. You carry one now, just in case. You unwrap it and check. Still warm from last night, like a sleepy coal. You smile. It's like carrying a dragon's breath in your pocket. There's a term for this kind of fire magic, eldhugi, fire spirit. Some believed that fire itself was alive, that tending it meant speaking to it. So you speak. Behave tonight, you whisper, as you bank the coals and cover the flame with a stone ring. The forest rustles, maybe wind, maybe not, but your fire holds, small and defiant. And that's all you need to sleep with both eyes half closed. Your stomach growls again, louder this time. It's not just a polite suggestion, it's a full-blown protest. You've had fire, shelter, and warmth. Now your body wants a little something more glamorous, food. But this isn't a B&B in the fjords, it's the forest, and if you want dinner, you're going to have to go earn it. You rise, joints popping like old kindling, and scan the forest for clues. The snow's thin here, just a delicate crust between patches of dark earth and browned pine needles. Perfect for tracking. You crouch low, eyes sweeping for disturbance. There, faint prints, 4 toes, clawed, possibly fox. Could be dinner. Could also just be something watching you for dinner ideas. The Vikings didn't rely solely on hunting. That's a modern fantasy, all antlers and glory. The truth? They were master foragers. You reach down and pluck a stringy green stalk poking up from under the snow, urtica dioica, or stinging nettle. Most would skip it. Vikings made soup out of it. You fold the leaves carefully, using a trick passed down in whispers. Roll them so the spines don't sting, or scald them in boiling water to tame their bite. You pocket them like treasure. Nearby, you find a patch of wood sorrel, heart-shaped leaves, lemony tart, and safe to chew raw. You pop one in your mouth and let the sour zing wake your senses. Food in the Viking forest wasn't about gourmet. It was about not dying. You push deeper into the undergrowth, moving like a shadow that smells faintly of smoke and wet wool. Then, you spot it. A squirrel, fat and careless, foraging along a fallen log. Your hand instinctively reaches for your throwing stick. Yes, throwing stick. Not glamorous, not cinematic. But it works. Vikings sometimes used simple tools like these, honed by practice and desperation. You crouch low, breathe deep, and hurl. The stick hits bark. The squirrel bolts. You curse softly. The stick bounces back with a dumb little thud, as if embarrassed. But luck's still with you. You notice a faint rustle behind a tree, and this time you move slower. A rabbit. It's not watching. You creep forward already thinking of your snare. No need to get fancy. Just twine, a bent sapling, and a bit of trail magic. You set it, backing away like you're not interested, like this is totally casual and not your only hope for meat this week. While it waits, you go back to foraging. Wild onions, pine nuts, even a handful of rose hips, bright red and loaded with vitamin C, which, as every Viking knew, was how you avoided the dreaded gum rot known as scurvy. Historians still argue whether scurvy was common among land-traveling Vikings. Some say yes, others point to their forest diets as proof that they accidentally figured it out. Either way, you're crunching on sour little seeds like your teeth depend on it. You return to your shelter, arms full of odds and ends. The fire's still going. The smoke has politely discouraged both wolves and biting insects. You settle in, stringing your foraged goods together like a sad salad. The nettle goes into your pot first, Just water and a few rocks you heated in the fire to make the boil. Add sorrel, some pine needle shavings for taste and vitamin A, and a pinch of salt from your travel pouch. It's not stew, but it's not nothing. Then, a twitch. The snare. You rise quickly, almost tripping on your own anticipation. You hurry to the spot, heart thudding, not from fear this time, but hunger. And there it is. The rabbit dangles from the sapling, twitching faintly. You move quickly, mercifully. A swift twist, and it's done. You thank it, not theatrically, just enough. Vikings believed in respect, even for prey, especially for prey. You bring it back to camp and begin the process. It's not pleasant. It's not fast, but it's necessary. Vikings used every part. You skin it carefully, saving the pelt to dry. The meat you cut into strips, threading them on a stick. You sear it over the fire. No spices, no garnish, just smoke, heat, and time. The smell hits you first. Sharp, rich, earthy. Your stomach growls in anticipation. You eat slowly. The meat is stringy but warm. The soup is bitter but filling. You chase it with snowmelt water, and for a brief moment you feel full. Not just in the stomach, but in the soul. And then you notice something odd. The bones. You set them aside, but they feel heavy. Not physically, spiritually. Vikings often read bones, casting them for signs, listening to cracks, watching the way they fell. You remember this vaguely from stories. So you toss one into the fire. It pops sharply. The sound makes you pause. Some fringe Viking belief suggested that forest spirits used bones to speak, especially in places like this. Deep woods, firelight, silence. You don't expect anything, but you listen. Nothing. Just wind. Just crackling. Still, you pocket one bone. Maybe it'll tell you something later. Maybe it already has. You lean back, belly warm, fire steady, cloak around your shoulders like a hug from history. You survived another night, and that rabbit, it might have saved your life. You close your eyes and thank it again, softly, this time, just in case it's listening. You wake to the slow tickle of a pine needle against your cheek and the not-so-distant caw of a crow, nature's alarm clock and occasional funeral director. The fire has collapsed into a bed of sighing coals, and your breath clouds the air above you, warm for only a second before vanishing into the crisp dawn. Your back aches, your toes complain, and something in your shoulder makes a noise you're not sure is legally allowed. Welcome to Forest Living, Viking Edition. Your bed last night? A masterpiece of low expectations and desperate creativity. You peel yourself off the mossy ground and inspect your bedding. It's a mat of fir boughs layered with moss, softened with dry leaves and covered by your cloak. Not exactly 5-star, but it kept your spine from fusing with a tree root. You stretch, groan, and try to remember how you got through the night without being eaten. Ah yes, strategy. Vikings didn't just lie down anywhere. You'd picked your spot with care, slight elevation to avoid pooling water, natural cover from wind, and enough room to bolt if needed. Some Vikings used travel beds, literally rolled bundles of hide stuffed with grass or straw. Others didn't bother, relying on their cloaks and a good layer of forest insulation. You're somewhere in between. You added a layer of birch bark under your mat last night. Why? Because birch is waterproof. You can almost feel the smug approval of some ancient Norse camper nodding in the distance. You pull your cloak tight and make a mental note. The moss helped, but you need more. Sleeping directly on the forest floor sucks the warmth from your bones like a passive-aggressive frost demon. The trick? Build up, not down. So you set about rebuilding your sleep zone. The moss, soft and spongy, comes first. Vikings used sphagnum moss not just for bedding, but also for bandages. It's naturally antiseptic. You don't lick it, but the thought crosses your mind. You pile on more boughs, spruce mostly. Their needles are stiff but springy, and if you arrange them right, They don't stab your kidneys in the middle of the night. You add a layer of dry grass for comfort and finish it with a top layer of old cloak scraps. Congratulations, you've reinvented the mattress, Viking style. Historians still argue over whether Vikings routinely slept outdoors or sought out caves, huts, or bark shelters. Most agree. If you were on the move, you made do. And if you were smart, you didn't sleep on the forest, you slept with it. You sit back, admire your slightly lumpy masterpiece, and grin. Not bad for someone who started this journey wondering if they could make it through a single night. Time to think bigger. You need a structure, something between desperate lean-to and ambitious hobbit hole. You scout the area and find a fallen log thick enough to brace against. Perfect. You drag it into place with much huffing and creative vocabulary. Against this, you lean a series of long branches at an angle, forming a crude A-frame. For roofing, you gather bark, birch again, and lay it like scales over the top, overlapping. Then you top it all off with pine boughs, layering them like scales on a forest dragon. Inside, it's dark, earthy, and smells like tree sweat. You love it. You add your moss mattress, your fire ring, and your dried meat stash. It's a Viking forest hut. Sort of. You dig a tiny trench outside, because Vikings were surprisingly good at water management. The trench will channel rain away, instead of straight into your sleep hole. You line it with bark. It's hard work. Your shoulders scream, your knees whisper obscenities, but it feels right, purposeful. You pause to snack, chewing on pine nuts and a hard chunk of smoked rabbit. As you eat, you think about the quiet, stubborn genius of Viking engineering. They didn't waste effort. Everything had to serve a purpose: warmth, safety, survival, and sometimes comfort. Did you know Viking warriors sometimes shared bedding in the forest, not just for warmth, but for morale? Fringe tales speak of battle-bonded duos who could predict each other's thoughts just by breathing patterns during cold camp nights. Not exactly romantic, but deeply practical. Tonight, you'll sleep warmer. Maybe dream of long hauls and hot stew instead of tree sap and stiff moss pillows. You lean against the log wall of your new shelter, letting the sunlight filter through the cracks. It dances on your cloak like gold dust. You close your eyes for just a moment. When you open them again, you spot a detail you missed before: a tiny rune, carved faintly into the bark just beside your head. A vertical line with a hook, algaes, protection. Someone else used this place before you. Someone who knew the same cold, the same tricks, the same desperate need for moss. You touch the rune and whisper thanks, and tonight, maybe you'll sleep a little deeper. The axe feels heavier than usual today, not physically, but in memory. You run your hand along the edge, fingers tracing the nicks and notches left behind from previous swings, like scars in metal form. This tool is more than just a blade. It's your hammer, your knife, your shovel, your hammer again, and sometimes your friend. In the forest, swords are decoration. Axes are survival. You lift it over your shoulder and step out from your moss-lined shelter. The morning mist is still clinging to the undergrowth, like the forest hasn't quite made up its mind about letting go of the night. Your breath curls in the air, white and soft as wool. There's wood to chop, not just for fire, but for building, for crafting, for trading, if you happen to run into someone less axe-savvy than yourself. Vikings often shaped the forest around them, not just trudging through it, but pulling it apart and putting it back together again in smarter ways. You approach a dead tree, one already leaning like it's ready to give up. That's key. You don't chop living trees unless you absolutely must. Deadwood is lighter, easier, and doesn't bring the wrath of whatever forest spirit might be listening. You grip the axe and swing. Not hard, precise. It's all about rhythm. There's a music to it. Thunk, crack, thunk, a kind of Viking drumbeat. As the wood splits, you gather chips, not waste, tinder. You sweep them into your pouch. The larger chunks go into your pile for tonight. A good fire needs 3 types of wood: The fast burners, twigs, the steady burners, branches, and the slow kings, logs. You're building a fire pyramid, and you're doing it with style. You pause to sharpen the blade. You use a flat stone from the stream and spit, because water's too precious this morning. You run the stone in slow, careful arcs along the edge, like you're brushing hair. There's calm in this, the ritual of sharpening, of maintenance. You feel better already. Vikings sharpened tools almost obsessively, not just for function, but for belief. A dull blade was considered unlucky, even disrespectful to the tool. Some even believed that sharpening was a form of worship. The edge had to be honored, or it wouldn't serve you. Fringe accounts describe warriors who slept with their axes under their pillows, not for defense, but for dreams. Some claimed the spirit of the axe would guide them while they slept. You haven't tried that yet, but tonight might be the night. You carry the axe to a fallen log and begin splitting. The wood groans under the blade, then gives with a sigh. Piece by piece, you reduce the log to usable chunks. You pile them under a thick pine for later drying. But the axe isn't just for chopping. You've got another project in mind: carving. You sit by the fire and begin shaping a piece of antler you found yesterday. It's been cleaned, dried, and now it wants to be useful again. You shave off thin curls with the axe's heel, not the edge, just the small inner curve near the shaft. It gives you better control. Vikings loved antler. It was used for everything from buttons to knife handles to delicate beads. The bones of animals became tools, art, and memory. You shape the antler into a small hook, maybe for a belt, maybe for a snare. It doesn't matter. The act of creating it is enough. Historians still debate whether antler craft was purely utilitarian or carried spiritual weight. Some believe objects carved in the forest were offerings, silent prayers etched into bone. You hold the piece up to the light. It's rough, imperfect, but it's yours. You tuck it into your pouch and glance at the axe again. So much more than a blade. And speaking of blades, you remember another forest truth. Every axe has a twin. The small one, the one for carving, the beel. You carry yours on your belt, a narrow-headed chopper with a short handle and a lot of attitude. You pull it out and begin trimming branches. With this, you can fashion stakes, tent pegs, even little utensils. Today's project? A spoon. Because why not? You find a thick pine knot and start shaping, slowly, carefully. The forest is quiet, watching. You've been here long enough now to sense it. That stillness isn't emptiness. It's waiting. The axe sings softly against the wood. You hum in reply. A tune passed down from nowhere. You finish the spoon just as the light begins to change. Sun tipping west, shadows getting long. You hold it up. It's ugly, functional, perfect. You laugh, softly, the kind of laugh that tastes like sap and satisfaction. Tonight, you'll eat with something you made, with an axe. The sun dips lower, and with it comes a stillness that's different from the day's calm. This one hums. It creeps in slow, beneath the bark, behind the stones, into your bones. The forest at dusk doesn't shout. It listens. You pause, spoon in hand, halfway through scraping the last curl from the bowl. Your ears twitch. Yes, twitch, because you hear it. Low, far off, a howl. Not long, not loud, just enough. You lower the spoon. That wasn't a dog. Welcome to one of the oldest Viking fears. Wolves. Not the cartoon kind, not the lone warrior's best friend kind. The real ones. The kind that don't care about your axe, your fur cloak, or how poetic your campfire looks. You stand, slow and silent. The fire is small, but the scent travels. Smoke is both ally and enemy. It masks you, but it also marks you. You douse the edges, rubbing dirt into the outer ring to kill the scent trail. You tuck your food high into a tree with twine. One squirrel got into your stash last week. You don't need a wolf deciding it wants the same experience. Wolves don't hunt humans often, but that's a modern truth. In Viking times, when you smelled like blood, fat, and 3-day-old stew, you were a curiosity. Maybe a threat. Maybe a meal. You recall the old tales, Ulfr they called them. Not just animals, symbols, warriors, testers. In some stories, they led you home. In others, they led you to your death. Some Vikings wore wolf pelts not just for warmth, but to claim strength, to steal the beast's spirit. Others avoided them entirely. Fringe traditions even claimed that whistling in a forest could summon wolves, not just the furry kind, but old spirits, guardians, or punishers. You remember this too late. You'd been humming earlier, loudly. Oops. You slip your knife into your belt and grab your spear, hand-carved from ashwood, tipped with an iron point scavenged long ago. Not ideal, but enough. The underbrush rustles, but it's the kind of rustle that disappears when you look. You crouch low, scanning the tree line, and then nothing. The woods fall back into silence, which is somehow worse. And that's when you do something odd. You start singing. Not loud, not cheerful. A slow, droning chant. An old song. Not for the wolves. For you. Because that's the Viking way. When you can't be stronger, be louder inside. Make the forest hear you. Let it know you're part of it. You don't challenge the wolf. You honor it. You respect its space. You let it pass. Or you hope it lets you pass. Your voice drifts through the trees. You don't know all the words. That's okay. The melody is enough. Historians still argue whether Viking forest songs were literal or metaphorical. Were they meant to keep rhythm while walking? Were they prayers? Or just a way to keep fear from cracking your skull open? Nobody's sure. You just know you're singing. The fear settles, not disappears. Just sets like dew on your skin. You move again, quieter now. You think of the other forest predators, lynx, boar, bears. But wolves are different, smarter. They test you. Sometimes they follow for hours just to see what you'll do. You loop around your shelter, checking for tracks. None. Not yet. You kneel and scatter pine needles around your perimeter. Any heavy step will disturb them. Viking burglar alarm, forest edition, and then something stranger. You take ash from your fire and mark a symbol outside your shelter. An old one. Elhaz, the rune of protection. It looks like a trident or an outstretched hand. You draw it with care, whispering each line. Fringe beliefs said these marks could ward off more than wolves. The unseen things, spirits of the lost, the curious, the vengeful. You finish the mark, stand back, and nod. It's not armor, but it's something. Back inside, you close your cloak around you and lie flat, ears open. The wind picks up. The trees groan. Then you hear it again. The howl. Closer. But not hunting. Just calling. It fades into the night like breath. You exhale. Not tonight. You close your eyes, the spear close, your body curled tight. You think of the wolf not as enemy, but as neighbor, equal, another survivor. And when you sleep, you dream not of being hunted, but of running, of paws on frost, of breath in the cold air, of eyes gleaming silver in moonlight. You are not prey. You are the forest. The morning light filters through the canopy in patches, those soft, dappled streaks that make everything look gentler than it really is. But the forest isn't gentle, not to the unprepared. You've learned that, felt it in your bones, in your boots, in your stomach when you tried to eat those probably not poisonous berries last week. Today, you walk with purpose. Not because you know where you're going, no one really knows in these woods, but because you know what to look for. Signs. And not the spiritual kind, not yet. You're looking for tree bark. Or more specifically, what's been done to it. Vikings were illiterate in the modern sense, but not unreadable. They left marks, runic symbols, bark scars, tied bundles of twigs, a silent language that turned forests into memory palaces. You pause beside a tall birch, its bark peels in delicate ribbons, papery and white. But that's not what draws your attention. Someone has carved into it. Two intersecting lines, shallow but clear, a direction marker. You touch the lines gently. Old, but not ancient. Maybe a trader, maybe a scout, maybe someone just like you, trying not to get lost in a place that eats compasses for breakfast. You start noticing more. A knot in a tree filled with charcoal. Intentional. A bundle of sticks hung high, twine-wrapped. Signal for danger ahead. Maybe a warning about unstable ground or something worse. Vikings didn't just wander. They recorded as they walked. The forest was their journal. You follow the signs with cautious trust. The path curves toward higher ground, and you recognize a method to it. You begin to walk like a reader. You scan trees, note patterns, slash marks low mean water nearby, crosses high mean keep going straight. It's beautiful, really, this subtle, rugged language. Historians still argue about how widespread these bark markings were. Some claim they were rare, used only by elite scouts. Others believe it was common among traders and travelers, an open-sourced system of survival. Either way, it works. You reach a ridge and see what they might have meant to lead you to, a natural clearing. Bright, quiet, still. The kind of place where sound drops away and every movement feels deliberate. At the far edge, another tree. This one has something else, a strip of sap dried in long amber ropes. You scrape a bit onto a cloth. Pine sap is more than glue. It's fire starter, antiseptic, even chewing gum if you're desperate, and possibly a bit foolish. Vikings used it for sealing seams, patching boots, and calming children. It's a forest cure-all. You walk deeper, and your fingers brush along rough trunks. One tree catches your eye, not for a mark, but for what's missing. A square of bark, cut clean. Someone harvested it. Recently. You know why. Birch bark wasn't just kindling, it was parchment. Vikings wrote on it. Not sagas, not poetry, lists, numbers, messages. Some even argue it was the Norseman's sticky note. A scrap of bark tied with twine could mean, met a bear here, left in a hurry, don't be dumb. You cut your own piece, scrape it flat, and etch a single rune. Rad. Advice. It's your gift to the next traveler. You tie it with a twist of nettle cord and hang it on a nearby branch. Maybe someone will read it. Maybe someone needs to. Then there's the sap again. This time, pooled in a crevice, thick and golden. You dig a finger in, rub it on your cracked knuckles. The sting is immediate. The relief, slow. It's sticky, but healing. Forest first aid. Fringe stories suggest some Vikings believed certain trees were watchers. They stored memory. Marks left on them weren't just practical. They were spiritual. By cutting into bark, you were leaving a part of yourself. Not just a symbol, a presence. You step back from the tree, just in case. You drink from a leather pouch, stretch your back, and sit at the edge of the clearing. The air is still, but not empty. You hear birds now. Woodpecker, maybe. The click of insects in the grass. And far off, a single knock. Could be wind. Could be a warning. You rise and follow a new set of marks. These ones deeper, shaped like teeth. Axe strikes. Someone cleared brush here not long ago. You test the ground. Hard-packed. Traveled. A Viking footpath, disguised as wilderness. That's the trick. The forest was never unmarked. You just had to know where to look. And now you do. You come upon the river by accident, or so it seems. A gap in the trees, a flicker of light where there shouldn't be any, and then the sound, the steady, low murmuring of water over stone. Like the forest is whispering to itself, or humming. You approach cautiously, knees bending with each step, boots finding the dry places without needing thought. You've learned to walk the way the forest wants you to, slow, listening. The river isn't wide, but it moves with purpose. Water surges through a tight gully of boulders, crashing and spraying like it's trying to escape its own skin. You kneel, touch the surface, cold enough to make your fingers regret every decision they've ever made, but clean, refreshing, and necessary. You're thirsty, yes, but more than that, you need to wash. Vikings didn't wander around coated in grime just for the aesthetic. Cleanliness was survival, wounds festered fast, hands made food, water made sure neither became an early funeral. You dip your hands, cup a few mouthfuls, the cold shoots through your teeth. You wince. Worth it. Now, here's the thing. Water is life, but it's also risky. You scan the bank for tracks, hoofprints, probably deer, a good sign. But another set, clawed and shallow, not wolf, not bear, dog. You glance across the river. On the opposite bank, something glints. A bit of cloth, a belt, something man-made. Someone else has been here recently. Vikings knew rivers were crossroads, trade routes, territory lines, sometimes battlegrounds. They didn't fish every river they saw, because not every river welcomed visitors. Historians often assume Vikings fished at every opportunity, but that's not quite right. Fishing wasn't always safe. Riverbanks meant ambushes, nets could tangle, and if you slipped into that glacial flow, you were an icicle with regrets. Still, food is food. You pull out a crude hook, carved from bone and tied to a length of braided gut. It's not fancy, but it's worked before. You bait it with a sliver of rabbit fat from last night and cast it in with a flick. Then you wait, not the sit on a rock and stare kind of wait. The fidget with your knife and scan every shrub kind. The forest remains quiet. The water pulls gently at the line. You hum. The same tune. It's become your anthem, hasn't it? You think about the fish that might be down there. Trout, maybe. Or pike. Fierce, ugly things with too many teeth. Some fringe Viking tales called them river wolves. Probably because they bite back. You feel a tug. Not hard, just a twitch. You reel in slowly, hand steady, heart louder than necessary. A flash of silver, another pull, then a splash. You've got it. A small one, wriggling and furious. You grab it, bash it quick, whisper thanks. That's how it's done. You gut it with your belt knife, rinse it in the current. The blood coils downstream like a ribbon. You wonder who else sees it. You sit back, fish in your lap, and scan the opposite bank again. The cloth is still there. You decide to check it, because curiosity hasn't killed you yet. You cross upriver where a fallen tree makes a natural bridge. Slippery, narrow, inconvenient. So naturally, you go, because you're a Viking now, or at least you're acting like one. Midway across, the tree groans under your weight. You freeze, balance, breathe, you step again, and then you're across. The cloth? A scrap of linen, blood-stained, tied to a branch, not fresh, a few days old, maybe a signal, maybe a bandage. Either way, someone left in a hurry. You glance around. The brush is disturbed, a campfire circle, stones still warm, footprints leading away. Whoever was here knew the same tricks you do, the same forest language, but they're gone now, left the river, left this place. You return across the log, slower this time. Not from fear, from thought. Rivers are lifelines, but they're also thresholds. In old Viking belief, the river was often seen as a border, not just between places, but between worlds, living and dead, wild and tamed, known and unknown. You sit back at your side and cook the fish slowly over a low flame. You add a sprig of nettle, some wild salt. It hisses, flakes, sizzles. You eat in silence. The fish is rich, not perfect, but warm. And in that moment, you understand why not every Viking rushed to fish. Sometimes the river gives, sometimes it takes. You're chewing on the last bite of fish when you spot it, a mushroom, or at least something mushroom-shaped, poking from beneath a tangle of fallen leaves near the base of an ash tree. Pale cap, broad gills, no obvious slime or warning signs. It looks innocent enough. You eye it suspiciously. The forest is full of things that look like snacks. Some are. Some want you dead. Vikings knew this well. You brush the dirt from the stalk, lift it gently. It breaks clean. That's a good sign. Maybe. You hold it under your nose. Mild, earthy, no sourness. Still, you hesitate. Then you remember the pouch. You open it, carefully. Inside, dried mushrooms, collected over the last few days. Each one vetted by smell, by memory, by very minor trial and error. You've had some close calls, but these are trusted allies. You add the new one to the maybe section, because while food is precious, so is your liver. Mushrooms were critical to Viking forest survival, not just for eating, though that mattered, but also for medicine, for rituals, for other things. You know what we're hinting at. You squat beside a tree stump and begin sorting your collection. The Boletus, brown cap, spongy base, earthy and rich when cooked. The chaga, black and crusted, clinging to birch like an old wart. Not tasty, but powerful. Vikings steeped it into tea to boost strength and focus. Then there's the red and white spotted Amanita muscaria. You stare at it, tucked safely in a pouch within a pouch. The mushroom of myths, poisonous in large doses, mind-bending in small ones. Shamans used it in ceremonies to speak with the gods, or so the stories say. Historians still argue whether Viking berserkers used hallucinogens like amanita before battle. The image of a foaming, howling warrior tripping on divine fungus has appeal, but others suggest it was just adrenaline, or madness, or theater. You're not about to gnaw one raw and start seeing Odin in the treetops, but you understand the reverence. In a world of frost and silence, a mushroom that makes you feel something can feel like a doorway. You gather a few turkey tail mushrooms too, fan-shaped, colorful, and good for tea. Vikings didn't know about polysaccharides or immune systems, but they knew what made them feel better. As you wander, you find more signs of old foragers. A patch of moss disturbed just so. A ring of stones where mushrooms were dried in the sun. A log with scrape marks. Someone's knife tested each cap before slicing. You're not the first. You won't be the last. You return to your shelter and start your makeshift drying process. A flat rock, warmed by fire. You lay out the caps in neat rows. They'll shrivel, lose weight, become dense little packets of forest wisdom. It's odd, isn't it? The things that save you are often the things you were taught to fear. Fungi, decay, darkness. But decay is just another form of transformation. You sip some chaga tea from your carved wooden cup, the bitter taste blooming across your tongue like charred wood. You wince. It's not delicious, but it feels right, like it's doing something. Then you lie back and stare at the treetops. There's a peace that comes with mushroom hunting, quiet focus, the joy of noticing what most people step over. A beetle scuttles across your boot. You let it pass. The forest is busy. Always. You hum again, that same lullaby tune. The mushrooms dry, the fire flickers, and you feel it. That slow, strange thing the Vikings knew. That in the forest, survival isn't always about hunting. Sometimes it's about listening. To the trees, to the rot, to the small things growing in the dark. You stare down at the berries in your hand. Small, red, shiny, deceptively cheerful looking. The kind of thing that would absolutely be on the cover of a survival handbook titled, "Don't Eat That." You sniff. Smells like berry. Helpful. You roll one gently between your fingers. The skin gives a little, but not too much. No milky sap, no rot. That's something. Still, this forest is a trickster. You've eaten berries before. Some were kind, some were not. Vikings, as it turns out, didn't have the luxury of guessing. They learned early, through trial, error, and probably a cousin who didn't make it. You think of that now as you hold the berry just beneath your lip. Then, in a rare act of restraint, you lower it. Let's go through the rules. Color, bright red. Could be good, could be evil. Texture, firm, but not hard. Leaves, oval, alternating. You pull one off. Rub it on your wrist. Wait. This was an old Viking trick. If it itched, burned, or turned your skin strange, you knew to back off. So far, nothing. Next step, the tongue test. You press a bit of juice to your tongue tip and hold. 30 seconds. Tingly, bitter, metallic. You wait, like a nervous contestant on a cooking show. Nothing. You swallow a single one. Just one. You'll wait an hour and see. That's the Viking way. You collect a few more while you wait. Lingonberries, crowberries, bilberries. Viking forests were full of edible jewels. But picking the wrong one meant a long, slow descent into regret. Historians still debate how Viking communities cataloged safe versus dangerous flora. Some believe they passed knowledge orally, through rhyme or story. Others suggest it was a family trade, each clan having their own botanic Bible. You sit in the shade, chewing a sprig of mint you found near a stream, and consider how much of survival is just waiting. Watching your stomach, like it's about to send you a review. Berry was adequate. No hallucinations. Would eat again. Your pouch has a handful of other specimens. Some you know. Cloudberries. Soft, orange, sweet. High in vitamin C. Rowan berries. Tart. Better cooked. Sacred to Thor in some regions. Juniper. Piney. Bitter. Useful for flavor and purification. And some, total mysteries. You keep those separate. Maybe you'll test them later, or not. One time, you ate a blue-black berry that turned your mouth numb. Spit like tar. Spent the next day seeing shapes in the trees that weren't there. Or maybe they were there. Fringe beliefs among forest-dwelling Vikings held that some plants opened your eyes to the hidden. They didn't say what you'd see, just that you would. You decide to skip a second try. The hour passes, no stomach cramps, no dizziness. You smile and eat 2 more berries. The taste is tart and clean. You feel victorious. You also feel not dead, which in this forest is a high bar. You head back to camp, pocket full of cautious triumph. Along the way, you gather more. You even find a patch of wood strawberries, tiny, potent, sweet as a bribe. You chew slowly, savoring every bite. You also gather leaves, sorrel, wild mint, and fireweed. For tea, for poultices, for making your little forest life feel slightly civilized. That night you prepare a mix, stewed berries, dried rabbit, and a sprinkling of pine nuts. A wild Viking trail meal. It smells better than it looks. You eat slowly, carefully, always watching for signs. The forest doesn't tell you when you've messed up. It just lets you find out. But tonight, the food settles. The fire stays lit. And your belly, finally, is quiet. You lie back and stare at the canopy, full of stars and leaves and hidden things. And you think of the Vikings before you, crouched beside fires, tasting berries with the same blend of hope and suspicion. You're not just surviving, you're learning the forest's language, one cautious bite at a time. The fire is burning low again, whispering rather than crackling, and your eyelids feel heavy, not from exhaustion, but from the quiet. That kind of deep quiet you only get in a forest at night. When the wind has stilled, the animals have decided you're not interesting, and even the trees seem to breathe softer. You wrap your cloak tighter around you and settle in, back against a warm stone, knees pulled close, the kind of posture Vikings might have mocked until they tried it. And then, without meaning to, you speak aloud, just a line, a whisper of a story. Once, a man crossed the forest alone, chasing the shadow of a god. It's not for anyone, not even yourself, really. It's just habit now. Vikings told stories like they breathed, around fires, on longships, beside beds made of moss and dreams. They told tales to remember who they were, and to remember that they were not alone. You keep speaking, not loudly, softly, almost like casting a spell. The story takes shape, a hunter, a raven, a set of footprints that vanish when the snow begins. You're not sure where it's going, but that's not the point. This is how it always began. Not with structure, but with rhythm. The rise and fall of voice, the weight of silence between words. The forest leans in, or so it feels. You pause and look around. The firelight flickers against tree trunks like old bones. You continue. And he found the god, not in the cave, not in the tree, but in the wind that told him to turn back. Storytelling wasn't just pastime in Viking life. It was practice. For memory, for battle, for grief, for courage. They called them sogur, sagas. And sagas weren't just grand epics. They were everyday whispers, small survival stories, cautionary tales, inside jokes that lasted centuries. One popular tale, a man who challenged a bear to a wrestling match. Another, a woman who tricked a ghost out of its own haunting. Some were true. Some were true enough. Fringe Viking beliefs even held that telling a story could keep evil away. Not because of the words, but because of the naming. Speak the fear aloud, and it can't sneak up on you. You understand that now. You don't feel brave until the story is out in the air, curling into the night like breath. You poke the fire and think about your own sagas. They won't be written in books. They won't be sung by skalds. But they'll exist, in the bend of your walking stick, in the smoothness of your spoon handle, in the soot on your tunic. You add a log to the fire and pull your blanket over your legs. Your voice drops lower. You're not telling it anymore. You're living it. And as you speak, something shifts. Not outside. Inside. The forest fades into a gentle blur like the beginning of sleep. The story winds down. The god in your tale becomes a shadow. The hunter becomes lost, and then found, and then forgotten. You stop speaking. Not because the story's over, but because it no longer needs you to tell it. You lie back and stare up at the trees. Above, the stars blink in and out, like they're listening too. And in the hush that follows your words, you realize this was never about survival alone. It was about remembering, repeating, whispering into the silence, just in case the forest needs to hear it again. You smile. You close your eyes. And in the dark, the story lingers, like an ember that refuses to die. The first thing you notice is the sting. A sharp, throbbing pain just above your ankle, pulsing in time with your heartbeat. You sit up too fast, kicking aside the cloak, and hiss through your teeth. There it is, a gash, angry, red, crusted at the edges with a bit of dried blood and leaf debris. It's not gushing, but it's not nothing. You press around it gently, warm, swollen. Not a good sign. You don't even remember how it happened. A branch, a rock, the slip of your own knife. It doesn't matter. It's here now, and it's already whispering infection. In the forest, wounds are less about drama and more about logistics. A scratch can be the beginning of a fever. A blister, the prelude to sepsis. There's no clinic, no urgent care, only knowledge and moss. You pull your kit from your pouch, not sterile, but smart. Beeswax cloth, a sliver of pine resin, a strip of clean linen, and the forest's answer to antibiotics, honey, thick, dark, almost black in color. Vikings prized honey for its sweetness, yes, but also for its power. Raw honey doesn't just taste good, it kills bacteria. You scoop a bit onto your fingertip and smear it over the wound. It stings worse now. That's how you know it's working, or that you're still alive. You sit cross-legged and focus, clean first. You dab the wound with cooled boiled water from your canteen. Then you take a second look, deeper than you thought. You'll need more. From your satchel, you pull a lump of fat, animal lard mixed with crushed herbs, yarrow mostly, and a bit of plantain leaf. You mash it with your fingers until it becomes a greasy paste, then smear it over the honey. Seal and soothe. Fringe Viking remedies were full of odd combinations. Maggot therapy? Yes, they tried that. Maggots eat only dead flesh, leaving healthy tissue intact. Effective, if not charming. You don't have maggots today, thankfully. But if this wound festers, you know where to find them. You wrap the linen around the wound, tying it snug but not too tight. The pressure eases the throb. You exhale, one step closer to surviving the week. Now, rest. You lean back and let your mind drift to the other Viking cures you've gathered. Pine sap as an antiseptic and skin sealant. Juniper, smoke to clean wounds and purify shelter spaces. Burned leather ash, sometimes blown into wounds to stop bleeding. Boiled bark tea, bitter and strong, used for fever. Historians still debate whether these methods were science or superstition. Truth is, they were both. The Vikings didn't separate them. If it worked, it was sacred. You glance at your leg. The linen's already soaked through with a little pink. You'll need to check it soon, but for now, you're stable. Not sprinting up hills anytime soon, but mobile. You take out a small bone needle and a length of sinew, just in case. If the wound worsens, you'll need to stitch it. Not elegant, but you've seen it done. Skin pulled tight, thread passed through like leatherwork. You've also seen it fail. Infection spreading, fever rising, a man babbling to ghosts in the trees. You remember that well. So you prepare. Because that's what the forest demands. You chew on a sliver of willow bark, bitter and gritty, nature's aspirin. It dulls the ache behind your eyes. You feel your shoulders loosen, and then, because pain has a way of focusing the mind, you begin preparing more salves. You crush dried nettle leaf with charcoal dust, good for drawing out infection. You mix ground fir needles with lard, a poor man's balm. You boil pine bark in your iron cup and let the tannins steep into the water. Bitter medicine for the stomach if the infection spreads. The forest isn't just danger, it's pharmacy. You sit surrounded by crushed leaves, broken twigs, and strange smells. And in that moment, you feel more like a healer than a fighter. Vikings weren't just raiders. They were herbalists, midwives, bone setters, wound binders. Knowledge passed down in campfire whispers and grandmother hums. You lean back, hand on your bandaged leg. The pain is still there, but manageable. You smile faintly. You'll heal, slowly. But only if you stay smart, only if you keep listening to the pain, to the plants, to the forest, which, if you respect it, just might help you survive yourself. The wind shifts, and with it comes a different kind of scent. Not pine or smoke or damp earth, but something musky, animal, and faintly sour. You pause mid-step, nostrils flaring. This isn't just the background scent of forest life. This is something specific, something nearby. You duck behind a boulder, scan the undergrowth, and there it is. A trail. Not a path, exactly. More like a suggestion. Broken twigs, scuffed soil, a few tufts of coarse fur snagged on low branches. Something big passed through here. And recently. You crouch, brushing your fingers over the fur. It's brown-gray, stiff, smells like wet leather and bad decisions. Bare, most likely. You should turn back. Sensible people turn back. But you follow, not because you're looking for trouble, but because this trail isn't wild. It's worn, deliberate. Something's been walking this way for a long time, and soon you see why. The trees open into a clearing shaped not by nature, but by repetition. Grass trampled, rocks arranged, a patch of flattened earth, stained and scorched. Someone camped here, multiple someones. Maybe not last night, but not long ago either. In the center lies the answer, a long wooden frame, low to the ground, lashed together with rawhide, and stretched across it, fur, curing in the open air. This was a trapping station, a makeshift fur post. Vikings traded fur as much as they wore it. Mink, fox, squirrel, and beaver. Soft coin that could buy iron, salt, or passage across the sea. The forest wasn't just a pantry, it was an economy. You step closer, examining the hide. Well scraped, no tool marks. These weren't amateurs. This was someone who knew the trade. You spot another rack nearby, smaller, used for tanning. The bark around it is peeled, probably used to make a tannin-rich soak. The ground is littered with bones, small ones. Squirrel, maybe ermine, none wasted. Even the tails were likely kept. Viking traders were thorough. You kneel beside a rock with strange markings. A few etched runes, Fey, the symbol for wealth, scratched beside a tally of lines. A record? A warning? Historians suggest fur trade routes in Viking Scandinavia extended all the way to Byzantium. That's right. Your squirrel cloak could have paid for silk in Constantinople. That's how much value the forest held. You follow another trail leading away from the clearing. It dips into a ravine, crosses a stream, then rises again to a high ridge. There, tucked into a natural alcove, is a small cache, covered with bark. Hidden well. You uncover it gently. Inside, 2 pelts, folded tight, a bundle of sinew thread, a small antler needle case, a stone weight wrapped in cloth. You touch nothing else. You cover it again. This belongs to someone, or at least did. You sit nearby and try to imagine the trader. Alone? With a partner? Did they return to a village between halls? Or live out here, wild and cold but free? Fringe tales speak of fur traders who went too deep, men who forgot the sound of voices, who became more animal than man. Some say they walked upright only out of habit, that they knew the names of every bird and tree but couldn't remember their own. You believe it. You feel it sometimes. In the way your thoughts grow quiet out here, in the way you talk to yourself and expect the forest to answer. You hike back to your camp slower, thoughtful. On the way, you spot a trap. Simple, elegant, a snare for rabbit or mink, half collapsed. You reset it, not because you need the pelt, but because someone else might. Vikings shared the forest in this way. Traps marked with twine colors. Symbols scratched into bark. You didn't steal from another's line unless you were ready to fight for it. By the time you return, the light is fading. You sit by your fire and work the edge of your own hide. Fox, maybe. You soften it with fat and a bit of scraped bark slurry. You work the leather with your hands until it feels more like cloth than skin. This will be your belt pouch lining. Soft enough to protect the dried mushrooms, tough enough to last the season. You stitch the edges with care, using a fine bone needle and gut thread. As you work, you hum again, because out here, even commerce feels sacred. You don't just wear the forest, you carry it. There are some things you can't unlearn, and unfortunately, one of them is that birch bark, clean, dry, pliable, makes pretty decent toilet paper. You squat awkwardly behind a boulder, staring at your surroundings with what can only be described as intense vulnerability. A squirrel watches you, judging. You sigh. This, too, is Viking life. Let's be honest. Nobody talks about it in the sagas. The glorious battles? Yes. The poetic deaths? Certainly. But the day-to-day, down-to-earth biological realities? Not so much. And yet, here you are, living proof that even a hardened Norse traveler had to, well, take a moment. You finish your business and reach for the nearest clean bark. Not just any tree will do. Birch is the gold standard. It peels in smooth, soft layers and doesn't crumble like dead leaves or sting like nettles. It's not luxurious, but compared to your other options, it's practically silk. This is what survival looks like sometimes, squatting in the cold, trying not to think too hard about it, and thanking the forest for trees that multitask. You return to camp, washing your hands with ash and snow like a seasoned forest apothecary. Vikings didn't have hand sanitizer, but they weren't clueless either. They used ash for scrubbing, moss for sponging, snow for rinsing, and sometimes even lye soap made from burned bones and fat when available. Not glamorous, but effective. Clean hands, clean conscience. Now, you sit by the fire, warming your fingers and thinking about just how deeply Vikings integrated with their environment. Everything had a purpose, a second purpose, a third. Take moss. You've used it as insulation, wound dressing, boot stuffing, water filtration, and now, you sniff your cloak, it might have found its way into your laundry. Vikings didn't have detergent, but they had ingenuity. A soak in cold water with wood ash, a bit of scrubbing, and a rinse in a running stream could freshen garments well enough to keep lice population to a dull roar. Speaking of lice, you scratch your scalp absent-mindedly, then stop. Number not today. You rummage through your pouch and pull out a bundle of dried wormwood. It stinks, bitter and sharp like a warning in plant form. You crush a handful and rub it along your collar and cuffs. Vikings used wormwood and tansy to repel fleas and lice. You've even heard stories, maybe exaggerated, of warriors boiling their tunics in a solution of lye and wormwood before battle. Not to clean them, but to keep pests from driving them insane. You believe it. You add wormwood to your fire. The smoke swirls with a pungent tang that might just keep even ghosts at bay, or at least mosquitoes. You step back and look at your shelter. It smells like smoke, sweat, pine, and dignity barely holding on. In short, perfect. You smile. Because even this, the less flattering parts of survival, feels real, feels earned. Historians rarely write about Viking sanitation practices, but the evidence is there. Combs carved from antler, ear spoons, tweezers, soapstone basins. Viking hygiene wasn't just about vanity. It was about staying alive. Parasites weakened you. Dirty wounds festered, smelling like death. That attracted predators, both animal and human. So yes, they cared. Maybe not in the scented candle way, but in the don't die of filth kind of way. You boil a small pot of water with pine needles and crushed mint. It smells amazing. You dip a cloth in and wipe your face. It stings a little. But afterward, you feel new, cleanish, rested-ish. You lie back in your shelter, the smoke curling around you, the fire low and steady, your scalp tingling faintly from the wormwood. There's no glory in this part of Viking life. But there's peace. And maybe, when the sagas left it out, it wasn't because they didn't value it. Maybe they just assumed everyone knew. That surviving in the wild wasn't just about swords. It was about birch bark, ash, and dignity. The wind tonight is different. It doesn't howl. It hovers. Hangs in the branches like a thought you're trying not to think. You sit by the fire, sharpening your belt knife when it hits you. You haven't spoken to another person in days. Not a soul. Not a whisper of a footstep that isn't yours. But you haven't felt alone. Not really. And that might be the most unsettling part. Vikings had a complicated relationship with solitude. On the one hand, the image of the lone wanderer, the brooding berserker, the exiled son, the shield maiden seeking visions, was romantic. On the other hand, nobody really survived alone for long. Not without help, even if that help was invisible. You pause, look up at the dark, feel it looking back. Some would call it superstition, others intuition. But deep in the forest, things feel. The air has a personality, the trees remember, and you're beginning to talk to them, out loud, just in passing. Easy there, you mutter, as a branch brushes your face. Not funny, you tell the stone that stubbed your toe. Thanks, you whisper to the fire when it catches on the first try. You chuckle softly. Maybe you've gone full Viking. Maybe you've just gone a little weird. But weird is working, and the forest hasn't eaten you yet. Vikings used charms, not just for luck, but for company. A token carved with runes, a braid of hair worn close to the skin, a bone etched with someone's name. Invisible companions. You reach into your pouch and pull out your own token, a small stone, smoothed by river water, with a rough carving of manaz, the rune of humankind. You didn't carve it for anyone in particular, just for the idea of not being entirely alone. You roll it between your fingers. There's comfort in that, a grounding. Fringe Viking beliefs included the notion that thoughts could be stored in objects, that by holding something long enough, it remembered you, that when you were gone, it could still hum your name into the soil. You look over your meager possessions, the spoon, the needle case, your walking stick. They all feel familiar now, as if they've been listening. You prop the stick beside you and speak again. Don't let anything walk off with my boots, yeah? The stick, predictably, says nothing. but also doesn't fall over. So you count that as compliance. The fire snaps once, loud. You jump slightly, then laugh, and it echoes. A soft bounce off the trees. You sit still. It's not laughter you hear next, but breathing. Not yours. You freeze. Hold your own breath. Nothing. Then, a low rustle. Not threatening, not urgent. Just movement. And then it's gone. You stare into the dark and realize something profound. You are not supposed to be alone in here. Not completely. That was never the deal. The Vikings knew this. Even when they traveled solo, they brought the invisible with them. Ancestors, spirits, oaths. Even when sleeping under stars, they felt surrounded. Not watched, accompanied. There's a difference. You think about that for a long while. When you lie down, you lay out your things carefully, like a circle. Each item facing inward, toward the fire, toward you. You place your token at the head, your spoon at the foot, your blade to the right, your pouch to the left. Not a fortress, a fellowship. And in the quiet, you speak once more. Good night. No one answers, but nothing leaves. And that's enough. You wake to the sound of wings, not thunderous, not dramatic. Just the soft thump-thump of feathers displacing morning air. You sit up slowly, blanket around your shoulders, and scan the treetops. There it is, perched on a branch like it owns the forest, which, let's be honest, it might. A raven. Big, glossy. Watching you with eyes that don't blink nearly enough. It tilts its head, once, then twice. You tilt yours back. Congratulations. You're officially having a staring contest with an omen. The Vikings revered ravens, not just as birds, but as messengers, companions, and occasionally co-workers. Odin himself had two, Hugin and Munin, thought and memory. They flew across the world each day, returning with whispers and secrets. You give this one a nod. Which one are you? You ask quietly. Thought or memory? The bird croaks once, non-committal. Ravens are clever. Everyone knows that now. But the Vikings believed it. They saw them open knots, hide food, follow hunters to carrion. Some warriors even claimed that if a raven followed you through the forest, it meant fate had taken notice. For better or worse. Yours is still watching, still quiet. You toss it a scrap of dried meat. It hops forward, pecks once, then grabs it and flutters to a nearby stump to eat in peace. Because even spirit birds have boundaries. You smile. The bond between Vikings and ravens wasn't just mythology. In isolated forests, you learn quickly which creatures matter. Ravens weren't just signs, they were sometimes guides. Some tales even suggest they led lost travelers back to safety. Other stories, less kind. Fringe folklore warns that a raven landing 3 times in front of you means a death is coming, yours or someone else's, but you're not counting. That's the trick. Don't count. You break camp slowly, glancing at the raven as you pack. It stays nearby, hopping tree to tree like it's watching your technique. You sling your pack over your shoulder and nod again. You lead, I'll follow. It caws. You begin walking. Not toward anything specific, but away from the place you've been too long. The air is cooler today, sharper, and the trees are denser. You hum as you walk, something low and repetitive. The raven glides overhead, pauses, circles. You get the sense you're being tested, or amused. Then you find it. A tree with a carved symbol, deep, clean, fresh. Ansuz, the rune of communication, divine speech. Odin himself. It's not your work. Someone else passed through here recently, maybe days ago, maybe less. You glance up. The raven is perched above the mark. You chuckle. All right, I get it. You press your palm to the rune. Communication, thought, messages. It feels right. The Vikings used runes for many things, not just writing, but invoking. A rune carved in the forest wasn't graffiti. It was a message to the world, maybe a warning, maybe a prayer. You add a small line beside it, not a rune, just a mark. Yours, a twig crossed with a curve. Something you've been drawing into the dirt for days now without realizing. Maybe it's your own kind of rune. The raven croaks again. Yeah, I'm going, you mutter. You keep moving, through brush and low limbs, across a stream shallow enough to cross without wet boots. The raven follows, sometimes close, sometimes distant. By midday, you find a thicket of berries, not the kind you trust. But the raven dives down, pecks at a few, and leaves the rest. You wonder, does it know which are safe? Guess you're not sharing today. Another croak. You pause for lunch. Dried fish, fur tea, a handful of nuts. The raven watches but doesn't beg. Just waits. Like it has all the time in the world. Vikings believed ravens could carry the thoughts of gods. But maybe, just maybe, they also carried the thoughts you didn't know you needed. The ones too quiet to think alone. You speak to it, not like a pet, like a companion. You tell it what you miss, what you fear, what you still want to find, and it listens. That's the strange thing. Not the bird. The listening. You don't realize how much of survival is noise until something finally lets you speak without judgment. You keep walking. The raven leads you to a tree filled with fungus, brown shelves growing in a spiral. Fire starter. You collect 3. It circles again. Lands on your stick pile. You laugh. Is this your idea of direction? But you follow. Evening comes fast. You make camp beneath a fur canopy. The raven lands above you. Stays. You toss another scrap. Tomorrow, it may leave. Or maybe not. But tonight, you are not alone. You stare into the fire, and the raven stares into you. And in the hush, you wonder, what would Odin say if he could see you now? Then again, maybe he is. Your lips are dry, cracked at the edges, pulling every time you speak, which isn't often these days. You touch them gently and wince. You need water. Again. Not snow, not ice, not chewing on frosted leaves and pretending it's hydration. Real water. You rise from your fire pit and scan the trees. The raven is gone, off on its own errands probably, but its absence feels less like abandonment now, more like freedom. You're learning to be your own omen. You move toward where the land dips, where the soil softens underfoot and the moss thickens. Classic signs. Water flows downhill, always, even in forests that feel like they have no direction at all. After about a quarter mile, you hear it, the soft murmur of a stream. You smile despite the thirst. You crouch by the edge. The stream is narrow, only a few feet across, but fast-moving. That's good. Still water breeds illness. Flowing water keeps itself alive. You cup your hands and drink. It hits your tongue like cold metal, but it's clean. You drink until your belly protests. You scoop a little more into your cup, your carved one, the one you made with the ugly handle that somehow fits your fingers just right. The water settles. Tiny bubbles cling to the edge. You watch them burst one by one. Then you remember something. You're not just thirsty. You need to store water. Vikings didn't carry canteens. They used horns, wooden flasks, even small animal bladders. You glance at your own gear, a waxed leather pouch tied with a bone pin. Not elegant, but it holds. You fill it, seal it, and tuck it away. Hydration isn't about panic. It's about rhythm, about planning for thirst before it arrives. You strip off your gloves and soak your wrists in the stream. The chill seeps into your bones and you hiss, but hold. Cool wrists mean a cooler core. You feel your heart slow just slightly, as if thanking you. As you rest there, eyes closed, you remember another Viking trick, using ice or snow not to drink, but to draw heat out of swollen limbs. You pat down your aching knee with a wad of slush, then wrap it tight with a linen strip soaked in cold water. Fringe Viking practices included pressing cold stones to the forehead to treat fever. It wasn't medicine. It was mercy. You smile at that. You drink again, slower now, letting the water sit, letting it become part of you. Hydration, it turns out, is deeply emotional. You think of the sailors, the longboat crews crossing fjords, where salt water stretched in every direction, and one skin of fresh water had to last 3 men. They rationed sips, measured mouthfuls, whispered oaths over their flasks. You don't whisper, but you hold your cup like it matters. And it does. You splash your face. The cold wakes something behind your eyes. You stand, refreshed and real again, and follow the stream upstream, curious. Eventually, you reach a bend where the banks widen. Shallow pools form here, perfect for washing. You strip your shirt and dunk it, wringing it out again and again until the smoke and salt and sleep sweat bleed away into the current. You hang it over a branch and do the same with your tunic. While they drip, you sit on a stone and wash your hands, your arms, your face, cold, so cold, but cleansing in the truest sense. This is a baptism, not of faith, of function. You are becoming more forest and less person by the day, and yet more yourself than you were before. When your shirt dries in the breeze, you pull it on again and feel human. Just a little. Enough. You collect moss from the stones. Sphagnum again. Dried, it'll filter water in a pinch. You tie it in a bundle with grass string and store it. Before you leave, you kneel again at the edge of the stream and whisper, "Thank you." Historians still argue whether Vikings spoke to rivers like gods, but the sagas are clear. Water was not a thing. It was a being, a danger, a gift, a threshold. You rise, and with every step back toward your camp, your flask full and your limbs damp with cold, you carry the stream with you. Not just inside your pack. Inside you. You're not just surviving. You're learning to be fluent in water. There's a trick to disappearing in the forest, and it has nothing to do with magic. It's about knowing that the forest sees in shades of movement, not color. That silence doesn't mean absence. That to vanish, you don't need to hide, you need to belong. Today, you practice that. The light is gray and mottled. Clouds hang low, turning everything the same cool tone. Your fur cloak blends naturally now, scuffed with ash and sap. Your boots are stained green and brown, your tunic patched in forest hues. You no longer stand out, you sink in. Vikings didn't call it camouflage, but they used it, not with paint and pixels, but with soot, mud, moss, and motion. Warriors smeared ash across their faces before raids. Hunters coated themselves in crushed pine, not to look fearsome, to become invisible. You kneel beside a log and rub dirt onto your palms. Cold, damp, real. You don't move quickly. That's the first rule. You move with purpose, slow and low. One step, then stillness. Another, then silence. You are no longer walking through the forest. You're part of it. There's a clearing up ahead, and you plan to cross it. But first, you stop. You crouch behind a fallen tree and just watch. A doe steps into the clearing. Her ears twitch. Her nose lifts. You freeze. Not a breath, not a blink. She lowers her head, grazes. If she senses you, she gives no sign. That's when you know you're doing it right. You remember how Vikings stalked prey in the woods. Slow steps, controlled breath, and distance. Their prey wasn't always animals. Sometimes it was people. Rival clans, bandits, unwanted visitors. Camouflage wasn't just survival. It was power. You smear more mud on your arms, along your jawline. It cools your skin, darkens your silhouette, breaks up the lines of your body. Your reflection in a pool nearby doesn't look like a person anymore. It looks like the woods looked back. You crouch again, wait for the wind. Another Viking trick. Always move with the breeze. Let it carry your scent away, not toward. Let its noise mask your steps. You step into the clearing with the wind behind you. The deer startles, looks up, then bolts. Not from you, but from a shifting shadow on the other side. A fox, maybe, or something larger. You're already gone, back into the brush. Your heart pounds, not from fear, but exhilaration. You didn't fight, you didn't run, you became unseen. You understand something now. Vikings didn't survive because they were loud and brutal. They survived because they knew when to disappear. You head back to camp and think of the times when blending in saved lives. During hunts gone wrong, during winters with food scarce and strangers near, during crossings through disputed woods. Historians still argue whether Viking cloaks were designed with camouflage in mind, but some archaeological finds hint at it. Undyed wool, soot-streaked edges, mottled patterns. Accidental or intentional? No one knows. But it worked. At camp, you build a low fire, hidden behind a natural rock wall. You don't want smoke today. You want shadow. You eat in silence, cold dried meat and hard bread, barely chewing, barely breathing. Because tonight, you want to test something. You wait for darkness, then you move. Cloaked, soot-smeared, scent masked with crushed mint, you melt into the forest. You test how close you can get to a sleeping bird, to a resting fox, to a group of deer bedded down in the thicket. You never touch. You never disturb. You just be. And the forest lets you. That's camouflage, not hiding. Belonging. You stink. Let's just get that out of the way. You smell like fire and wet wool and a week's worth of decision-making that didn't involve soap. But that's not what bothers you. What bothers you is how everything else smells. The forest is a riot of scent. You can smell the damp undergrowth, the dry rot of a fallen tree, the sour tang of your boots, and, worse than all of that, yourself. If you can smell you this clearly, animals definitely can. And that's a problem. Because scent in the forest is language. It announces your presence. It makes promises. And sometimes, it picks fights. Vikings knew this well. They used scent not just for hygiene, but for tactics. A man who smelled like smoke and pine was a man who'd been awake, working, blending in. A man who smelled like blood and metal might not make it through the night. You rummage in your pouch and pull out your remedy, crushed juniper berries, pine needles, and a bit of old charcoal. You mash them together and begin rubbing them into your skin like a strange, gritty cologne. The charcoal masks, the juniper distracts, the pine settles. You also chew on mint. Not for your breath, though it helps, but for your gut. Vikings believed mint calmed the stomach and cleared the mind. Honestly, you'll take both. You dig a small pit and fill it with smoking pine bark and dry herbs. You step over it slowly, letting the smoke curl under your cloak, into your hair, around your legs. You hold your arms out like you're air-drying shame. This isn't a ritual, it's survival. Fringe tales tell of warriors who coated themselves in bear fat and ashes before battle, not to look fierce, but to smell wrong, to confuse animals, to unnerve men. You get it now. You lift your cloak and sniff. Better. Earthy, sharp, less like a lost soup. You turn your attention to your shelter. Your bedding reeks. Moss, sweat, old stew. You wince. You pull it apart, layer by layer, hanging each piece near the fire. You rub the fir boughs with fresh pine, sprinkle them with dried lavender you found last week, and lay everything back down like you're preparing for the cleanest war ever fought by a single person. Vikings understood that scent was power. It marked territory. It calmed children. It warned off wolves. And, this is the weird part, they even used it to send messages. You've read about it. Birch bark bundles tied with a twist of wormwood. A satchel left at a crossroads with juniper tucked inside. Not just offerings, but statements. You decide to make one. You crush mint, mix it with fat, and smear it along the edge of your shelter. A line, a scent wall, a sign that this space is claimed, not by a beast, not by a spirit, but by you. You rub a bit under your arms, in your boots, even behind your ears, just in case the forest wants to get close. You gather sap, scrape it into a pot, warm it just enough to melt, and mix it with crushed lavender. You smear it onto a strip of leather and hang it at the entrance of your camp. It smells like effort. but it's oddly comforting. By now the sun is setting. The air is cooler, thinner. You light a low fire and keep it smoky on purpose. Not thick, just steady. Enough to confuse the air around you. Enough to make a fox think twice. You sit beside it and exhale. The scent of smoke clings to your skin, your cloak, your thoughts. And yet, you feel cleaner than you have in days. Not just cleaner. Different. You've turned scent from a weakness into armor. And maybe that's what the old Vikings understood better than most. The wild doesn't care if you look brave, but it listens very carefully to how you smell. You're sharpening your blade again. Not because it's dull, not exactly, but because the act of sharpening has become a ritual, a rhythm, a way to feel control in a place where so little is under your command. The blade sings softly against the whetstone, a whisper of steel over stone. You hold it at just the right angle, draw it down, heel to tip. Again. Again. Every pass makes a sound that feels like progress. The Vikings understood this. Sharpening wasn't a chore. It was meditation, preparation. It meant you were still thinking ahead, still expecting tomorrow. You inspect the edge, clean, gleaming. You run your thumb gently, not across the blade, but along it, and feel the bite. Yes, it's ready. You don't just sharpen for battle. This knife trims bark, splits kindling, carves spoons, slices meat, and if you're unlucky, removes splinters with a whisper and a prayer. Vikings didn't have multi-tools. Their blades were the tools. You begin to clean the handle. It's antler, worn smooth by time and your grip. You polish it with a cloth dampened in ash water, then set it down and pick up the axe. Heavier, grimmer. You examine the edge. 1 nickel. You remember when that happened, striking too hard into frozen wood and bouncing back. The axe didn't punish you, but it remembered. You smooth it out now. Stone, spit, patience. As you work, you think of the stories, the ones where blades had names. Viking axes called skull splitter, toothbiter, widowmaker. It sounds theatrical, until you realize that when your tool saves your life enough times, it earns an identity. You haven't named yours, but you could. Fringe beliefs said a named blade should never touch another without permission. That 2 blades left crossing overnight would cause quarrels between their wielders. You laugh softly. You've spent enough nights alone to start believing that sort of thing. You oil the metal with a mix of animal fat and ash, not just for shine, for protection. Rust is a killer, quiet, slow, unforgiving, like winter in disguise. Then finally, you sharpen your spear. It's not a soldier's spear. Not really. The tip is narrow, forged from scavenged iron, lashed to a straight branch with sinew and tar. But it holds, it flies. And in the right hands, your hands, it's enough. You spin it slowly, checking balance. The shaft is worn where your palm has gripped it night after night. It remembers you, like all good weapons do. The sharpening is done, but the ritual isn't over. You light a small fire. No need for warmth, just for flame. You hold the knife to the light, then the axe, then the spear, just for a moment. Letting them catch the glow, letting them see the fire and remember what they're for. Not just killing, surviving. Vikings believed blades had memory, that if you disrespected them, left them dull, dirty, unused, they would fail you when you needed them most. Some buried tools with the dead, believing the items would serve in the afterlife. Others left offerings beside blades, a drop of blood, a splash of mead, a whispered oath. You whisper nothing, but your silence feels like a promise. You wrap your weapons in cloth, one by one, and lay them beside you as you rest, not for battle, for comfort. You feel safer with them near, not because you fear attack, but because they're familiar. Yours. You fall asleep with the whetstone still warm from your hand, and in your dreams you hear the steel whisper back, not as a threat, but as a reminder that you are sharp and ready and still here. There's something about the way the trees press in today. Closer, somehow. Not physically, spiritually. Like they've gotten wind of something you haven't, and they're standing guard. You step carefully between roots and soft moss, boots pressing without a sound, eyes darting from branch to branch. You're not looking for danger. You're listening for it. But what you feel instead is presence. The kind the Vikings feared and respected in equal measure. The Landvetter, spirit guardians of the land, the unseen stewards of hills, streams, stones, and trees. Not gods, not ghosts, something in between. You've never seen one, but you've felt them on mornings like this. Everything is still, but not empty. You stop at a tree thicker than the others, its bark pale and carved with ancient ridges like the lines of an old face. It hums in your chest, not a sound, but a resonance. You step closer, place a hand against it. Cool, solid, watching. Vikings believed some trees were sacred, not just useful, not just tall, but aware. You didn't cut those trees. You didn't sleep under them without permission. You asked. You kneel and whisper, "I'm passing through. I mean no harm." The forest doesn't answer, but something lifts. You move on. As you walk, you start to notice the signs, little stacks of stones at the base of trees, deliberate bends in branches, clumps of flowers placed too carefully to be random. Markers. Vikings used to leave offerings at such places, milk, bread, even silver. Not because they were afraid, though fear played a part, but because they believed in exchange. You take from the land, you give to the spirits. You have no milk, but you have a carved bead, a simple thing from your pouch. You hang it from a twig with a strip of linen and nod once, firmly. A fair trade. Historians still argue whether the Landvetter were religious concepts or folklore, but every surviving Viking law forbade desecrating certain natural spaces. You didn't insult the forest, not if you wanted to keep your livestock or your legs. You pass a stream, its edges lined with smooth stones. You remember, water spirits too had moods. Vikings didn't spit into streams, didn't throw garbage into lakes. If a boat capsized mysteriously, it was probably because someone got disrespectful. You kneel, rinse your hands, and drop a small pine cone into the current, an old gesture of greeting. The cone twirls and floats downstream like it knows exactly where it's going. You smile. Further ahead, you find a rock, flat-topped, wide, set apart from others. You stop. You know this shape, an Andvegusular stone, spirit stone, a place where words can stick. You kneel beside it and draw a rune with ash. Awaz, the rune of connection, between realms, between you and whatever is listening, not for protection, for respect. You speak again, softer this time. "I'm passing through. I see you. Thank you." The breeze stirs the treetops, nothing more, but your shoulders relax. You start to notice something strange. The path ahead is easier. Not smoother, exactly, but clearer. Fallen branches seem to lie just to the side. The brush is thinner. The forest is letting you through. Fringe Viking stories claimed that if the spirits of the land approved of your presence, they'd guide your steps. You'd never see them, but you'd notice. Less rain, fewer twisted ankles, a sense of being watched with interest, not hostility. You walk on, careful not to break twigs underfoot. You hum a soft tune, not a song, a vibration, a tone that seems to thread between the trees, and just before dusk, you find a natural shelter. Hollowed stone, moss-soft floor, dry despite the rain that starts to whisper on the leaves above. You set your fire with ease. It catches fast, the smoke curling up through a gap in the stone. You don't even need to search for kindling. It's all around you. You smile into the flame. Some say the Landvetter never speak, but you're starting to think that maybe, just maybe, they answer. The forest has gone white, not from snow, though that's coming. You feel it in the air, the kind of deep chill that isn't loud but still demands attention. It settles in your chest, behind your eyes, in your fingers. No, this whiteness is light. The sort that arrives when the clouds are thick, the sun's low, and everything reflects gray. You wake in your shelter with frost at the corners. Your breath puffs visibly. You reach for your boots and find them stiff. Not frozen, but not far from it. Winter isn't coming. It's already here. This is where Viking survival became an art form. The cold wasn't an occasional inconvenience, it was a lifestyle. And in the forest, a deeply personal adversary. You sit up slowly, pull your cloak tighter, and start moving. Not just to do things, but to heat things. Your limbs, your breath, your thinking. You strike your flint with more urgency today. The spark catches fast, thanks to last night's dried fungus prep. The fire flickers to life, and you lean close, letting it breathe warmth into your cheeks. You can't afford to lose heat. Not now. First priority, hands and feet. Always. The Vikings had an old saying, lose your sword hand, lose the fight. Lose your feet, never fight at all. You rub your palms with rendered fat from your stores, working it into your knuckles, behind your nails. Not pleasant, effective. You slip dried moss into your boots. Fresh, thick. You even double layer your socks, wool on wool. It itches. But the itch means warmth. You eat while crouching near the fire. Dense bread, slivers of dried meat, snowmelt boiled with pine for a faint tea. It's not satisfying. It's fuel. Then comes the hard part, leaving camp. You pack your gear tighter than usual. Everything must insulate itself. You wrap your knife in cloth, tuck your flint near your body. You even lash your axe closer to your chest, beneath your cloak. Metal in the cold is a betrayal waiting to happen. One bare touch and it'll bite you harder than a wolf. Your breath becomes your metronome. Every step kicks up tiny crystals of frost, and even the sound of twigs snapping is sharp like glass. The forest isn't just quiet, it's holding its breath. You reach for your walking stick and begin to trace a wide path, not for exploring, but for tracking the sun. That old Viking trick. If you can't see the sun directly, you look for light lean, the way shadows curve, the brighter side of bark, the glint on snow. It all points. If you know how to ask. You stop at midday, if that's what you can call this pale, dim slice of the sky, and build a tiny fire behind a windbreak of stones. Not for cooking, for survival. You toast a flat rock, then place it inside your cloak, against your stomach. Vikings use this method constantly. No central heating, make your own hot core. Fringe Viking texts mention stuffing heated rocks into socks before bed. You laugh at the thought, then realize you've already planned to do the same tonight. You keep walking, you don't want to, but if you stop for too long, the cold starts talking. At first, it whispers, just rest a bit. Then it offers, you could lie down, just for a moment. And finally, it threatens, this would be easier if you didn't fight. You fight, you keep moving. By dusk, the frost is thicker. Ice curls along branches. A bird call echoes, dry, lonely. No reply. Most animals have fled or burrowed by now. You envy them. You find a new shelter, a hollow between two rocks, layered thick with needles. You clear snow from the entrance, shovel out the wet with your cloak, and rebuild a fire in the hollow center. You heat another rock, this one for your feet. You eat. You don't enjoy it. And as the fire burns low, you lie curled tight, arms folded, breath steaming. You remember that the Vikings didn't always beat the cold. Many didn't. But the ones who did, they knew it was a game of inches. You don't have to be warm. You just have to be warmer than death. And tonight, you are. Barely. But it's enough. The forest doesn't feel empty tonight. It feels occupied. You noticed it earlier, when the wind shifted without warning, and every bird call seemed to fall silent mid-note. You thought maybe it was a predator, maybe a storm, but now, huddled near your fire, you feel it more clearly, like eyes that blink between the trees, like shapes that vanish the moment you turn your head. You're not alone, not in the normal way. Vikings had a word for this kind of feeling, draugr. But not all spirits were dead things. Not all strange presences were wicked. Sometimes the forest simply noticed you. Tonight, it notices you. You glance toward the edge of camp and see something hanging in the branches. A pouch, tied with sinew, stuffed with fur. You didn't put it there. Your breath catches, but you don't run. Instead, you move slowly toward it, keeping the fire at your back, your knife in hand. The pouch swings gently in the breeze, except there's no breeze. You reach out and touch it. It's real. Animal hide, stitched roughly. Inside, a small stone, a feather, and a single pine needle. It doesn't mean anything to you, but it means something. You untie the pouch and leave a trade in return, one of your carved bone buttons. You tie it back. A silent exchange. This wasn't for you. But someone left it here, and the forest decided to pass the message along. Vikings traveled with goods, of course, but they also bartered with tokens, items not valuable in coin, but in meaning. Stories, protection, memory. There are tales, quiet, fringe stories, of bartering not with people, but with things that pretended to be people. Shapes in fog, traders who asked no questions, markets that vanished by morning. You don't believe all of it, but you believe enough. You build up your fire a little, not too high, just bright enough to say, I'm here, I'm listening, I mean no harm. And then, movement. From the dark, just at the edge of flame's reach. A goat, small, gray, eyes catching the light. You freeze. Goats weren't native to these woods, not anymore. Someone brought it, or sent it. Or maybe it's not a goat at all. The creature stares at you, unmoving. You reach into your pouch and toss a handful of dried herbs toward the edge. Wild mint and clover. Offerings. The goat turns, vanishes between the trees. You exhale, but you don't relax. This night has a texture to it, threads pulling at the edges of your reason. You drink from your flask and whisper a line of an old Viking lullaby, not to lull yourself, but to fill the silence with your voice. This is how they stayed safe, you realize, not just by fighting or fleeing, but by participating, by playing by the rules of the forest, even the rules no one wrote down. You scan your camp and adjust your gear. You move your fire slightly, add extra ash to the edge, draw a rune, algas again, for protection, into the soot. You take a piece of birch bark and draw 3 slashes on it. You place it at the edge of your shelter, visible to anything that might be watching. Not a threat, a boundary. You don't want trouble, you just want peace. Historians sometimes ignore this side of Viking survival, the side that wasn't muscle and blade, but negotiation, with nature, with fear, with whatever else might be out there that can think, or mimic thinking. You don't sleep easily tonight. You rest with one eye on the fire, one hand on your belt knife. The pouch still hangs where you left it, untouched. The goat doesn't return, but neither does the silence. The night buzzes, and somewhere deep in the dark, you feel the forest watching and deciding. Hunger is patient. That's what you've learned. It doesn't knock loudly. It creeps in through the cracks, quiet as frost. You don't notice it at first. A yawn here, a slower step there. Then, one morning, you wake up lightheaded and dream-heavy, and the pit in your stomach has become a presence. Today, you feel it. There's no more meat left. The rabbit bones were boiled dry 2 days ago. The berries are gone. The pine nuts? You dropped half of them in a clumsy moment by the stream. You've officially entered the dangerous stage. Not panic yet, but strategy. The Vikings called it nodder, a word that meant need, but also necessity. Desperation sharpened with intent. You feel it now, humming behind your ribs like a drumbeat. You check your snares. Nothing. You reposition them, moving them to the edge of a frozen stream where animal tracks are fresh but faint. You bait them with what little you have left. A scrap of dried skin from your pouch, a sliver of bone. You walk farther today, beyond where your firelight can be seen at night. Hunger doesn't care about comfort zones. And then, finally, you see them. Prints. Hoofed. Fresh. Deer? Maybe. Too lucky. You follow anyway. The trail leads to a patch of disturbed snow, droppings, a broken shrub, a spot where something slept. You crouch low. You wait. You know you're not catching it, but you might catch what it leaves behind. You circle the area, watching the sky darken. And just before you turn back, luck. A squirrel. Not dead, but slow. Limping. You don't question how, you just act. Your spear is already in hand. One quick throw, you miss. Another. A hit. It doesn't suffer long. You whisper thanks and carry it back like a treasure. Back at camp, you build the fire high. You skin it quickly, quietly. Your hands know what to do now. You roast it slow, turning it over embers, watching the fat drip and hiss like rain. The smell fills the clearing. You eat fast, not stupid fast, but fast enough that you remember the taste of desire. The meat is tough, but it's warm. You chew until your jaw aches, and then chew some more. You save the bones. Tomorrow they'll become broth, and the day after that, tools. Nothing goes to waste. The Vikings didn't eat casually. Meals weren't guarantees. A stew meant success. A roasted bird meant luck. And when meat was gone, that's when the real stories began. Fringe tales spoke of hunger spirits, creatures drawn to the empty stomach, feeding not on flesh, but on the space where food should be. They whispered temptations, told you where to find a lucky route, asked you to follow lights deeper into the woods. You don't follow lights, you follow facts. Still, tonight, as you lick grease from your fingers and scrape every bit of meat from bone, you feel something watching again. Not hunger, not exactly, but something like expectation. You toss a bone into the fire. It pops, sparks. You bury the rest. Carefully, respectfully. You remember what a Viking woman once whispered in a story. If you feed the land, it feeds you back. You hope she was right. You rest easy tonight, not because you're full, but because you're not empty. And in this forest, that's more than enough. You dream of a longhouse. Not yours, not really anyone's. Just the kind of place that exists in stories. Fire roaring in the center, wooden beams dark with smoke, furs lining the benches, and the warm hum of voices. Laughter. Stories told in between sips of something hot and sharp. You wake up cold. There's frost on your cloak. Your breath makes a cloud above your face. No laughter, just silence. But the smell of last night's fire still clings to your hair like comfort. You sit up slowly, knees cracking, and smile despite the ache. Because today, you build something bigger. Not just a lean-to, not a hollow between rocks. Something that holds you. A winter camp. Vikings, when forced into long stays in the forest, didn't just survive. They settled in. Temporary structures that were half shelter, half shrine to cleverness. It's time you followed their example. You clear a patch of snow with your cloak and a flat stick. The ground beneath is damp, but not soaked. That's your floor. You begin gathering. Not at random, with a plan. You need A-frame poles, 2 long, sturdy branches. Ridge beam, thick, wide, straight as possible. Wall supports, smaller, flexible limbs. Insulation, moss, bark, needles, grass. You spend hours selecting. Each tree you approach, you touch first. You whisper, not out of habit, out of respect. You only take from the dead or dying, never from the standing strong. The frame goes up slowly. You lash the top with sinew. You wedge stones at the base for strength. You lean branches for walls, layering with bark like shingles. Overlap, secure. Check the wind direction. Adjust. Inside, it's tight, but tall enough to sit. You line the floor with pine boughs, then moss, then cloth. You build a fire just outside the opening. Smoke can't fill your shelter, but heat can drift. You craft a small reflective wall from stone and wet mud, angled to push warmth inward. A Viking trick, almost forgotten. You sit and test it. The back of your neck tingles. It's working. Fringe accounts describe winter shelters lined with snow for insulation. Igloo logic. You don't go that far, but you pack snow along the outer walls for wind shielding. It hardens into armor. Next, storage. You carve notches in a tree, hang a branch across them. Your shelf. You hang your food pouch, your drying leather, your tools. Inside, you tuck your most precious items beneath your bedding. Not for safety, for closeness. Your shelter has become a home. You decorate. Just a little. A carved stick above the entrance. The rune Berkanan. Growth, rebirth, a symbol of transition. You place a small stone beside your bed. Smooth, black, heavy with meaning. Your anchor. And at nightfall, as the wind howls outside and your fire spits low embers into the dark, you lie back against your pine moss bed and feel something rare. Pride. Vikings weren't just raiders. They were makers. Every camp was a statement. I was here, I endured, I belonged. You run your fingers over the bark wall beside you. It's rough, imperfect, and perfect. Tomorrow, you'll improve it. But tonight, you sleep in something you built. And the forest, for once, does not whisper. It sighs, like it approves. The snow comes silently. No thunder, no warning. Just tiny flecks at first, floating through the pines like drifting ash, then thicker, more deliberate. You don't notice it right away. You're too busy adjusting the angle of your reflective firewall, watching the smoke twist lazily toward the canopy. Then a flake lands on your knuckle, cold, sharp, real. You look up, and the forest is changing again. Snow isn't a threat by itself. It's a message. It says, everything is about to take more effort than you're ready for. You stand, stretch your sore shoulders, and prepare. First rule of snow in the Viking forest. Nothing stays dry unless you make it stay dry. You check your shelter. The walls hold. No leaks. You pack the outside seams with slush to freeze into mortar. You hang a hide at the entrance layered with moss. It's heavier now, harder to lift, but warmer, better. You gather wood, more than usual. Triple, maybe more. Vikings didn't just stockpile firewood. They turned it into insurance. Without it, your fire dies. Without your fire, you follow. Each branch you collect, you brush free of snow, test for snap. Wet wood lies. It pretends it'll burn, then sulks in your fire like a lazy guest. So you sort. Dry in one pile, damp in another, soak wet in a third. For later, when desperation kisses foolishness. You cover your logs with bark and snow. Paradoxically, snow insulates against more snow. It's a Viking logic puzzle you've come to appreciate. Inside your shelter, the temperature is dropping. You breathe into your hands, then reach for the heated stone near the fire. You roll it in cloth and press it against your chest. It's not cozy, but it buys you time. You sip pine needle broth, warmth in a bowl. Steam hits your face and smells like resin and resilience. The snow thickens. By midday, it's a quiet storm. Flakes the size of feathers, falling in slow motion. The world narrows. Sounds vanish. Footsteps are muffled whispers. Branches sag with white. And then, silence. The kind of silence that folds around you, slow and heavy. Like being inside a story with the volume turned down. You step into it. Every sound you make feels wrong. Too loud, too human. You walk the perimeter of your shelter, not patrolling, listening. Snow makes the forest strange. Familiar paths vanish. Everything looks the same until it doesn't. You mark your shelter with sticks, upright poles carved with notches, landmarks, waypoints. If a whiteout hits, you'll thank yourself. Vikings used to carve runes onto snow sticks, pushing them into the drifts as trail markers. You copy that now. Ride-ho, movement, journey, Isa, ice, stillness. You use both. The flakes catch in your beard, cling to your lashes. You blink slowly, adjusting to this new world. You check your snares again. No luck, but you leave them. Even in snow, life moves. You spot tracks, deer, faint and soft, disappearing into the white. A reminder, you're not the only one adjusting today. You return to camp and strip off your cloak, shaking it free of snow before hanging it by the fire. You rub your boots dry with moss and change your socks. Yes, again. Cold feet are the thief that steals your night. You light extra bark, the fire flares. Shadows dance on your walls. You sit, listening to the crackle. And you realize, this isn't terrifying. It's beautiful. The snow has remade the forest, quieted it, wrapped it in softness, given you space to breathe. The Vikings didn't fear snow. They adapted. They celebrated it. Sleds on frozen rivers, ice fishing through bored holes, snow shelters shaped like half-buried boats. You remember the story of the wanderer who got trapped in a storm. He lay beneath a birch for 2 days, wrapped in his cloak, eating ice and singing to stay awake. When they found him, they asked why he hadn't run. He said, because the snow was talking. I was listening. Tonight the snow talks, and you listen. You stoke the fire, wrap yourself in warmth, and sleep, surrounded not by danger, but by white, by quiet, by peace. You wake up to silence so complete, it feels wrong. The kind of quiet that makes your ears ring, that presses on your chest like a dream that overstayed its welcome. You open your eyes to find the entrance of your shelter completely gone, just a wall of white. Snowed in, you lie still, listening, no wind, no birds, just the faint creak of snow settling on your roof of bark and branches. Nothing has collapsed. Yet, you test your breath, still flowing. The air is cool, not stale. Some draft must still be seeping in from the edges. Good. You're not suffocating. Not yet. The Vikings had a word for this. Skafrenningur. The snowdrift that builds so gently overnight you don't know it's there. Until you do. You sit up, knees stiff, joints snapping. Your body has the distinct crunch of someone who's been sleeping in a box of half-frozen moss. You rub your arms, press your palms to your cheeks, warm yourself with the friction of sheer annoyance. Time to dig. You keep your knife close and push the hide aside. Beneath it, packed snow, hard as ice cream that no one asked for. You start scraping. Slowly, not with panic, with purpose. This is part of the deal. Vikings didn't panic in snow traps. They prepared for them. They built with vents, with angled roofs, with shelters that could be dug out from the inside. You angled your roof. You used a low entrance. You were ready for this, even if you forgot that you were. After 15 minutes of scraping and cursing, the white begins to lighten. Another few, and you punch through. A fistful of sky. Fresh air blasts in. You inhale greedily. It smells like wet stone, frost, and stubbornness. You crawl out slowly, head first, blinking like a mole entering the day. And there it is. The world is gone. Not gone, just simplified, reduced to shapes and suggestion. Trees become silhouettes. Paths disappear. The sky is a flat white mirror. Even sound feels farther away. You laugh once, sharply. Well, you say aloud, guess we're staying local today. No long hunts, no deep excursions. This is a day for tending camp, for holding, not pushing forward. You stomp a small circle around your fire pit, compressing the snow. You dig out the woodpile, grateful for the bark covering, still dry. You light a fresh flame and keep it high. In weather like this, smoke is your flag, your presence, your voice. You check the snare line nearest camp. One trap is buried, one is gone, string snapped, something hungry passed through. That's comforting, in a weird way. Life is still moving. You gather snow in a pot and melt it slow, sipping the warm water like it's a feast. Every swallow is a reminder. Even the cold feeds you if you learn how to ask. You prepare food carefully today. Flatbread heated on a stone, rabbit fat drizzled on top, and a sprinkle of dried greens. You eat with your fingers and lick them clean, because waste is for warmer months. The wind picks up briefly, scouring the trees. It screams for a moment, then hushes again. You reinforce your shelter, more snow packed along the base to prevent drifts. You sharpen your tools, rewrap your feet, rehang your scent pouches. You tend. This too is survival, not charging through blizzards with a sword, just being here. Stillness is power. Fringe sagas tell of a winter spirit that rewards patience. Scotty's cousin, perhaps, who wanders the white and leaves warmth only where it's deserved. If you curse the snow, it follows you. If you respect it, it lends you shelter. You nod toward the trees in case she's listening. By nightfall, the world has dimmed into a dull silver dome. You light your fire high. The flames crackle against the hush like a voice that refuses to be swallowed. And as you lie back in your shelter, belly warm, feet dry, and heart steady, you think, the snow isn't your enemy. It's your audience, and you've earned its silence. The wind shifts again, and this time it smells different. Not pine, not smoke, not the flat metallic cold of snow and stone. Something else, faint but distinct. Salt. You sit up straight, nostrils flaring. Your heart skips once, then remembers its job. Because if there's salt on the air out here in the forest, you're closer to the coast than you thought. Or maybe the wind is just playing tricks again. You stand, stretch, and listen. Not with your ears, but with your skin. And yes, there it is. A thin breeze, sliding past the trees, carrying something sharp, briny, familiar. Vikings were forest dwellers, yes, but also ocean people. Fjords and rivers, longships and tides. They navigated by stars, sunstones, bird calls, and yes, by scent. A shift in the wind could mean land. A certain bird's cry might mean a harbor. A salt-tanged breeze, that could save your life. You gather your cloak, your blade, and your walking stick. You're going to follow the wind. You leave your camp intact. You may return, or not. Either way, you don't destroy what's worked. You just pause it. You mark your path with bark slices, carved quick, tied to branches. The way back is never guaranteed, but you give yourself a chance. You walk into the wind. It's not strong, just steady. And the deeper you go, the more you feel it. On your face, on the inside of your ribs. Salt wakes something old. Something from before the forest. Something that remembers boats. You pass over a ridge, through stands of spruce and ice-crusted brush. The snow here is patchy, not because it hasn't fallen, but because something else has swept it away. Wind, real wind, long-distance wind. Then you hear it, a faint, rhythmic crashing, dull, heavy, like breath, like heartbeats the size of whales. Waves. You quicken your pace, carefully. Even now, survival comes before speed. The forest begins to thin. Trees give way to low shrubs, and beneath them, stone. Sandstone, broken and sea-slick. You crouch and run your fingers along a rock. It's damp, smells like stories. Then the trees part, and there it is. The sea. Gray and endless, rising and falling like it doesn't care who's watching. You step forward until you're on the edge of the bluff, boots planted firm, cloak snapping behind you like a forgotten sail. You laugh, loud and sudden. You can't help it, because this feels earned. Weeks in the woods, days buried in snow, nights spent arguing with shadows and moss. And now, you found the edge of the world. Vikings believed the sea was both beginning and end, the road to glory, the grave of fools, the breath of gods. And here it is, calm, for now, but infinite. You sit down, cross-legged, and watch. You stay for hours, maybe more. Time doesn't pass here. It just washes. You see no boats, no signs, just seaweed, gulls, foam, and stone. But the salt in your lungs feels like home. even if you've never seen this stretch of coast before. You build a small fire using driftwood, dry and eager to burn. You roast the last of your pine nuts and press your palm into the sand, feeling it shift beneath your skin like a living thing. You stay until the sun begins to fade. And then, because no Viking builds a future without honoring the past, you carve a single rune into the cliff beside you. Laguz, the rune of water, of travel, of emotion, memory, and life flowing forward. You trace it once with your fingertip, then step back. You take one last look at the sea, and then you turn back into the trees. The forest doesn't feel like a trap anymore. It feels like a road. And now, you know where it ends. The walk back from the sea feels different. You retrace your steps, carefully, precisely, but the forest doesn't feel like the same place. The trees stand where they were, yes. The snow crunches just as it did. But you are different now. Salt still clings to your cloak. Your boots are crusted with sand. The wind hasn't forgotten the ocean yet, and neither have you. You pass the bark markers you left, still swinging softly from their branches. They guided you forward. Now they lead you home. Vikings used trail signs not just to mark routes, but to measure growth. Each return meant a shift, a before and an after. A story earned. You step over your boundary sticks. You duck beneath the leaning pine that marks your camp. And there it is, your shelter, still intact. The fire ring, the moss-packed bedding, your drying rack, the rune you carved above the door. It's like stepping into a past version of yourself. You smile, a little surprised, a little proud, but something has changed. The fire pit's been disturbed, just a little. Ash shifted. A stone moved. You crouch and examine it. No prints, no signs of theft. But someone, or something, stood here. Maybe watched, maybe waited. You sit cross-legged beside it and listen. Nothing hostile, just presence. You light the fire again, slowly, respectfully. And then you do something you haven't done in days. You speak clearly, out loud. I went to the sea, you say. It's still there. You pause. You add, I brought it back with me. Because you did. In your pouch is a tiny bit of salt. Just a pinch. Collected from a tide pool and dried in the sun on a rock. You sprinkle it into the fire. It hisses, cracks, then settles. Offerings don't have to be grand, they just have to be honest. The Vikings made these kinds of gestures all the time. Salt tossed into a fire, ale spilled onto the ground, bread left on a stone, not because it changed the gods, but because it changed the giver. It marked the moment. You spend the next few hours repairing. Your gear has shifted. Your shelter needs reinforcement. You fix it with quiet hands. You change things too. You add a windbreak. You retie your food pouch higher in the tree. You carve a new rune on your walking stick, Gabo, a symbol of gifts, exchange, mutual respect. Fringe beliefs suggested that when you crossed the world, from land to sea, sea to land, you needed to rebalance the scales, give something back, take something in return, or else the world would remember your theft. So you balance. You bury a small offering beneath the fire pit, a pebble from the shore, a strand of your hair, a drop of water from your flask. Then you sit still. The sky darkens, and in the stillness, you hear it, not the forest, not the wind, your own breath. It's deeper now, slower. It matches the trees. It follows the rhythm of the world. Vikings believed that a person who lived with the land long enough became part of it, that the boundary between man and mountain, body and bark, eventually faded. You lie back and look up at the sky. The stars peek through the canopy. You see new ones tonight. Or maybe they've always been there, and now you simply know how to look. You feel no fear, just motion, the sea behind you, the forest around you, the fire within you, and ahead, whatever comes next. It starts with a sound you haven't heard in days. Voices, faint, distant, human. You freeze mid-step, a bundle of dry sticks in your arms. At first, you think it might be wind curling strangely through the trees, but then it comes again, clearer this time. Laughter. Your pulse kicks up, not in fear, in something else. Recognition. You set down the sticks and move low, quiet as habit, quiet as need. You slip between trunks and shadow, following the sound. Soon you see them. 3 figures at the edge of a frozen clearing, bundled, hooded, cloaked. One stirs a pot over a fire, another bends over a bough. The third turns slowly and sniffs the air. You duck back, heart pounding. It's been so long since you've seen other people, you're not sure how to see them anymore. But the Vikings understood this moment well. The wild trains you, shapes you, and sometimes it separates you so thoroughly from others that you return not as a person, but as something else. You crouch and consider, approach, avoid, announce, blend. Vikings had many ways of handling strangers. You could offer frieder, peace, a symbol carved into bark or raised hands with open palms. You could send smoke signals, a specific twist of green branches into flame, or you could wait and watch. You do the latter. The firelight reveals more. These aren't raiders. They're forest dwellers like you. Their gear is practical, worn. Their movements efficient, not theatrical. Survivors. You slip away for now, quietly. Back at your own camp, your fire still smolders. Your water boils. Your shelter stands. And suddenly it feels small, not weak, just personal, built for one. But now that you've seen others, the forest shifts in your mind. It's no longer an isolated trial. It's a network, a landscape filled with others doing the same thing in different ways. You sit by your fire and think, what would they say if you walked into their clearing? Would they ask your name? Would they recognize you as kin? You pull out your pouch and examine your markers, the runes you've carved, the tools you've shaped, the tokens you've offered to the land. All of it is your story now. Evidence that you belong here. You choose one. Your carved mana's stone, the rune of self and society. You polish it with a bit of cloth and tie it to a branch. You wrap it in a twist of bark and secure it with pine twine. A message. You'll leave it at their clearing's edge at dawn. Not a gift, a greeting. You remember how Vikings marked peaceful intent during unfamiliar encounters. No sudden movements, hands shown, eyes lowered slightly, but not submissively. A rune visible, food shared. If they respond, you'll know. If not, the forest will return to silence. But you won't be the same. You lie back on your bedding and stare at the flickering light through the wall of your shelter. Tomorrow, you might speak to another person for the first time in weeks. It feels impossible, and somehow, inevitable. You understand now that survival isn't just a skill set. It's a language. And after all this time, you're finally fluent. Dawn breaks like a secret. Not loudly, not in fanfare, just a subtle lift of the darkness. A soft glow bleeding in at the edges of the trees, turning black into charcoal and then into something almost gold. You rise before the light touches your shelter's floor. Today, you carry intent. You tuck your greeting pouch into your belt. Mana's rune visible, bark polished, twine neat. It's not much, but it says everything. That you're not lost. That you're not a threat. That you're ready. You walk quietly through the woods, back toward the clearing where the voices had stirred something strange inside you. Possibility. The forest doesn't resist you this time. It opens with each step, like it knows this isn't a hunt, or a test, or a retreat. This is a meeting. You reach the edge of the clearing. The fire is low. The pot is gone. No one is moving, but signs remain. A bit of smoke, a boot print in the snow, a sharpened stick jammed into the ground where one of them had sat. You kneel just beyond the clearing's edge, remove the token from your belt, and hang it from a young pine, just eye level. Visible, but not aggressive. You press your fingers to the bark beside it. Then you leave, not fast, not slow, just respectfully. Back at camp, you rebuild your fire, reboil snow, recheck your snares. The day unfolds like any other, but your ears are sharper now. Your attention rides the wind. By midday, you see it. At the base of the young pine where you'd left your token, something new. You move carefully, one step at a time. They've left a reply. A pine cone coated in honey and herbs, wrapped in a scrap of wool. No note, no symbols, just gesture. You smile. This is forest diplomacy. Vikings often used gifts like this as introductions. The sweeter the gift, the more peaceful the intent. A pine cone? Nature's currency. Honey? Scarce in winter. Herbs? Thoughtful. You don't chase them down. That's not the way. You respond. You carve a new token. This time a small disc of wood, marked with Rido, the journey, and Gebo, exchange. You oil it with fat, tie it with grass twine, and hang it back where the pine cone sat. You don't expect anything, but you do hope. Hope was something the Vikings believed in deeply, not in the modern sunny way, but as a tool, a sharp-edged thing you carry with you, not because the world is kind, but because you are determined. You sit by your fire that evening and feel the forest shift again, not into danger, into community. A loose, feral kind of community, sure, but one built not on names or stories or long conversations, just small things left in trees, and the knowledge that someone, somewhere nearby, has also survived. You lie back and stare at the stars through a crack in the roof. You remember that even the Norse gods had to send ravens to keep in touch. Even Odin needed messengers. Even the wisest needed reminders that they were not entirely alone. You exhale into the night and whisper, not loudly, not expecting a reply, "I see you." And for the first time in this long, cold silence, it feels like someone sees you back. The rhythm of your days has changed. There's still hunting, still firewood, still wind and cold and the steady discipline of not dying. But now, layered on top like a second heartbeat, is connection. A pine cone, a pouch, a wrapped bone needle with the initials R and thorn scratched faintly into it. You never see them, but you feel their choices, their thought, the back and forth of silent forest language. This morning, you leave a gift of your own, a perfectly shaped flint shard tucked into a birch bark fold and tied with your hair. A part of you, literal and symbolic. Vikings knew this kind of gift, not just useful, personal. The act of giving something that had touched your skin, your breath, your sweat, was sacred. It meant trust. It meant a thread now tied between two people. You go about your day the same as always, repairing, fetching, warming, watching. But you feel watched too. Not hunted, not stalked, observed. And somehow that feels better than solitude. By midday, you hear footsteps near your camp. No hiding this time, no crouching behind trees. You step outside, and you see her. A girl, young, maybe 15. Fur cloak patched with sinew, bow slung casually over her shoulder. Calm eyes, not afraid, not surprised. She stops, doesn't wave, doesn't smile. She just nods. You nod back. Then she turns and vanishes into the woods again. And you laugh, not loudly, but it feels like thunder in your chest, because that was enough. You've crossed the invisible threshold, from outsider to belonger, someone trusted to live beside the wild, not against it, someone who understands the quiet rules and the unspoken paths. That night you find another token, a carved figurine, a bird, maybe a hawk, no note, just shape and effort and silent communication. You place it near your sleeping mat, not as decoration, as company. Fringe Viking tales told of forest siblings, those who met in the wild, exchanged no names, but shared lives in subtle intersections. Food passed between trees, signals scratched into bark, an understanding formed through absence. You feel that now. The forest hasn't gotten easier, you're still cold, still hungry, still one bad twist of the ankle away from disaster. But now, you're held by something, not arms, not words, but awareness. Tomorrow, you might meet her again, or never. It doesn't matter. What matters is this. You're not surviving against the wild anymore. You're surviving within it, and someone else is too. It's the quiet that wakes you, not the absence of sound, but the rightness of it, a hush that feels earned, like the forest is holding its breath in admiration. You sit up, blinking at the thin silver light pouring through the trees. It isn't snowing, it isn't storming, it's settled. And so are you. You pull on your boots slowly, no rush, no fight. Today isn't about struggle, it's about noticing. Your fire is still alive, barely. A whisper of smoke curls upward. You feed it a pine twig, then two. The flames accept them like a welcome guest, not a beggar. You smile. Breakfast is simple. The last of your flatbread, toasted on a stone. A pinch of salt from the sea. A handful of dried berries left for you 2 nights ago, tucked in a hollow branch. You don't need words to thank her. You just live well with what was given. After eating, you clean your shelter, not because you're leaving, but because it deserves it. You sweep out ash, rearrange stones, patch a loose seam in the moss lining. The Vikings believed a well-kept camp reflected a well-ordered spirit. They weren't wrong. You walk the loop you've walked 100 times now. Check the snares, even though you're not hungry. Reinforce the bark wall, even though it hasn't shifted. You drink cold water from the stream because you can, not because you must. And then, for the first time since arriving here, you take nothing from the forest. You just be. You sit beneath a fir tree and carve a small medallion from bone. On one side, the Awaz rune, for trust, for movement in partnership. On the other, Dagas, the day, the light, the cycle complete. You tie it with thread and wear it around your neck. You're not marking survival anymore. You're marking continuation. You lie in your shelter that night, eyes open, watching stars blink through a break in the trees. You feel every inch of your body, not in pain, but in awareness. This is what being alive feels like. Tomorrow, maybe, you'll walk toward the sea again. Or maybe you'll follow the deer trail you've ignored for weeks. Maybe you'll find her camp. Maybe not. It doesn't matter, because the forest is no longer an obstacle. It's your home. You are no longer afraid of the wind. You know the trees by touch. You speak the language of moss, of silence, of small gifts left in branches. And when you sleep, finally, deeply, it's not to escape the day. It's to carry it with you into rest. And now, let it all fade. The scent of the pine fire still clings to your skin. The forest breathes slow beside you. Your body is heavy, in the best way, rooted, supported. You don't need to chase anything. You don't need to protect yourself. You're here. You've made it. Above you, the canopy sways gently in the night wind, but you don't feel the cold anymore. Your shelter holds. Your fire glows faintly, casting soft shadows that flicker like lullabies. The forest, once loud with questions, has fallen into rhythm. Its silence isn't empty. It's complete. Even the hunger has softened. Even the sharpness in your muscles has dulled into warmth. You've learned what the old Norse believed, that survival is not a fight against nature. It's a song sung with it, one slow note at a time. So now, just breathe. Let the weight of every footstep you've taken melt into the earth beneath you. Let the call of the raven echo far behind you. Let the cold become comfort. Let the stillness wrap around you like the oldest fur, worn by ancestors whose names you'll never know, but whose strength lives in you now. There is nothing left to do, nothing to prove, only sleep, and the sound of the forest keeping watch. Sweet dreams.